Happy birthday to Zoe.
Okay.
All right, we got T-1. Megan, make sure and let us know. Thank you. Very good. We'll call this special meeting to order for the revenue neutral rate hearing for tonight for USD 348 Board of Education. May I have an approval of the agenda, please?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Phil has moved and Kelly has seconded to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor, please say aye. Raise your right hand.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Susan. At this time, I'll ask us to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. For announcements tonight, we'll get into this a little bit more later, but because I don't think there's any way that we will be able to finish this hearing before the second hearing, which is scheduled for 6:30, don't worry. What we're going to do, we have a plan for that. We'll simply call a recess for the first meeting. That doesn't mean anyone will have the opportunity to be deprived to speak. I want to make sure everybody knows that up front. To follow the law of the second meeting, which is scheduled and was published for 6:30, I'll simply call that meeting to order, recess it, and come right back to the first. So I don't want to have anyone have the impression that just because the second meeting is scheduled at 6:30, that that's going to cut into time, both for the presentation and also time for the public testimony that everyone is here tonight, either to participate in or to listen in. So I want to say that up front. Okay, with that, at this time, unless anybody else has any announcements, we'll move on to C, which is the revenue neutral rate hearing. Part 1, the presentation to exceed the revenue neutral rate will be given by our financial director, Nate Ohlert, along with Superintendent Dodge. I want to make sure, does everyone have their packets before we begin? That way we're all working with the same information. If not, those are available in the back if you weren't able to get one already.
We'll wait for projection to start out here.
Yeah.
Before we get started.
There we go.
I want to make sure that, yep, all right.
Everything's working?
Right there.
Okay, thank you. You have the floor, gentlemen.
Well, good evening, and thank you for coming. So, Mark, do you want to jump to the next slide there? So this first slide here is for the R&R comparator, or the R&R hearing, obviously for the actual taxes levied last year, in 22-23, and then the actual tax rate in the center column. So we've got a total of the actual tax rates listed there again in the middle column. And then the one column over to the right is the neutral revenue tax rate. And then the final column there is going to be the estimated taxes for this for year 23-24.
And the neutral tax rate is what's necessary to generate the same amount of dollars this year as previous year. So the purpose of this hearing is for us to share with you our intention, our need to exceed the revenue neutral rate in order to operate and fulfill our obligations and goals for the upcoming school year.
This slide here is just a comparison of the mills for 22-23 that was approved. The milling column was a reflection of the photo ruling that we had in October, November last year. So you see there by the bullet point for supplemental general, there's the 7.991 mills that we had to lower to. Again, it's important to note the reduction from 13.26 mills that were approved to 7.991, and that will be resulting in a loss of about 667,000.
Is there a mic available?
Oh, okay. Okay, so I'll try to speak up. So due to the VOTA ruling itself, to make it the reduction, the funding, roughly about 340 of that 667 was transferred from our contingency fund. Yeah.
I'm right.
There's not a microphone.
That was a good idea.
That should help. Use your booming projection voice.
I will try to do that.
Use your yelling at me voice. How about that?
There you go.
So again, to make up the reduction that we had, roughly about 340,000 of that was transferred from our contingency reserve. The remaining 327,000 reduction came by the way of staffing freezes, deferred school and safety and security needs and updates to the 23-24, and transferring custodial maintenance salaries into capital outlay, thus deferring additional building and district improvements in the 23-24 and beyond.
And so what this slide shows you is initially what was approved last year by the board, the impact that the VOTA ruling had, and then where we are this year in our efforts to operate and recover.
This slide is missing, according to my tax statement, there's a thing called USD.
Sir, this part will be saved for, if you don't mind, if we'll go through the presentation, and then as the agenda states, we'll have time for the public testimony. But let's go ahead and get the presentation part done first, and we'll make sure and listen to any questions that you have when we get to the public testimonies part. Go ahead. Thank you, Nate.
Yeah, so for the estimated 23-24 mills that we're seeking, there's 20 mills for general fund, 13.73 mills for the supplemental general LOB, capital outlay was 7.1 mills, and the bond and interest 14.488 mills with a total of 54.661, which, as you can see through the two-year comparison there, we're coming into a little bit of a downtrend there. So the approved mills 22-23 were 54.87.
All right, ready? Okay.
So this next slide gives you kind of a historical look at the mills that we've had, just kind of give you a trend and an idea, just to kind of put everything together. So we have 2021 mills, which again, the total overall for 2021 was 57.259. For 21-22, we have 54.909. For 22-23, because of the decrease in mills in the LOB, that lowered down to 49.568. And then in 23, proposed for the 23-24 year was 54.66.
Okay. All right.
So these next few slides will just kind of give you a rundown of each fund that we have for the taxes. So first we'll start off with general fund. General fund is set for 20 mills by the state statute. The general fund is used for operating expenses of the district. Roughly is about 83% of the general fund is overall for the staff salaries. Some of those break down to certified staff, equates to 54%. Classified staff.
And by certified, you're talking teachers, your licensed workers in that sense.
Classified, which is hourly folks, transportation, food service, it's about 13%. 13% is classified. Food service is 3%. Administrative staff is 10%. and supplemental and coaching staffs, so it equates to 3%. So the remaining percentages, which is 17%, is for your operational of the district. Example, utilities, supplies, and also transfer to funds such as SPED, at-risk, CTE, etc.
And so for SPED, we're talking special education at risk are students that we need to provide additional supports for, whether identified through free and reduced or needing academic supports. And CTE is the college and technical education pathway. So we're talking about the different pathways. Our new pathway that we're trying to establish with agriculture science education, that will become a CTE pathway. We've got our business and computer pathways, Mr. Harmon's industrial tech pathways with woods and metals. Those are all considered CTE or career and technical education pathways.
Next, we have the supplemental general fund, commonly known as LB. Statute allows local school board to adopt a supplemental general fund LB in addition to the general fund of the school district to receive funds from the state each school year. The supplemental general fund is calculated by a percentage of the district's general fund and receives state aid for those. Below are some examples of the LOB. We have special education, career and technical education, which includes existing and new pathways. This year, new to the cost for the district this year is for certification of testing for students.
So when a student goes through your CTE, your career and technical education pathways, they have the ability to earn industry recognized certifications that can help them with continued education or employment, so that they can use that to gain a higher wage than someone without one of those certifications. In the past, those were up to the families or the students to pick up the certification costs, but starting this year, new legislation now puts that under the tab of the district to pick up.
Then we have K through 12 at-risk funding, supplementing salaries, costs associated with substitutes, the voter recovery for 22-23.
What's voter?
It's board tax appeals.
Okay.
Yeah. Costs associated with increased enrollments of students.
I want to
Yes.
address that. So each year when we build our budget, we utilize a funding mechanism, and the state requires us to use what's called full-time FTE. And they send staff out to us after September 20 to go through and basically certify the students that count within our building based on their attendance on September 20 and then a couple of days after September 20. And we utilize those numbers to help fund our budget. The way the law is written, we are not able to use current year numbers. We have to use the higher of the previous 2 years. So when you're a growing district, and in our case we are, last year we were up 41 new students. We don't get to count those 41 new students until this year's budget based on how they come out with the September 20 count.
But we still have to pay for them.
But we still have to pay for it.
Right.
So this year we'll get those 41 new students. This year, on top of those last year's 41 new, we had about 30, what did I tell you last meeting, 35, 36 new heads coming into our buildings. We don't get funding for them until next year. And so through the supplemental general fund, it helps us be able to pay for that education, if you will.
And then just the impact to the district as far as just increasing costs for supplies and electricity. Next, we have capital outlay expenditures from these funds, which will be this fund, is to adopt, are used for capital improvements expenses. The board approved an 8 mil levy in the capital outlay in the past. Last year, fiscal 22-23, we actually lowered the capital outlay mills to 7.089. The capital outlay funds again are used for the items listed there: safety and security, equipment and furniture, technology equipment, activity and uniforms, maintenance and custodial salaries, facilities and parking lot improvements, transportation purchases such as vehicles, buses, repairs and fuel, lease agreements such as Baker University, our high school HVAC lease, and our intermediate center HVAC lease.
One of the things that you try to do as a district is not put salaries in your capital outlay line if you can avoid it, for the purpose of you want to reserve those dollars for those capital improvements, the trying to offset or trying to prevent deferred maintenance. But when you have to move those salaries into capital outlay, it eats up dollars that could go towards those capital improvements.
And lastly, we have bond and interest. Bond and interest mill levy was approved by the majority of the voters for capital improvements. Bond and interest funds are solely used and utilized for bond and interest payments. These funds cannot be transferred to any other budget line. Below the statement here, this gives us a list of our current bond principal balances and plus the maturity dates. As you can see there, the first one, the series 2016, will expire at September 24. The total there is $12,365,000. It's correct.
Is there an accounting of where all of that stuff went?
As far as the
This-
bond projects,
The dollars, where did they go?
to the bond projects.
Right, but what did that buy?
We'll get to that. We'll finish your presentation and then we'll get to question. No,
Okay.
hold on to that. Yeah.
Where is-
Oh, we are there. Okay, sorry. That's okay. You were first to it. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. At this time, any patron that wishes to provide testimony to the board may do so. Statute 79-299, 79-2988 states, the governing body shall provide interested taxpayers desiring to be heard an opportunity to present oral testimony within reasonable time limits and without unreasonable restriction on the number of individuals allowed to make public comment. And so before we dive into all this, in the spirit of making sure we do everything as correctly and as forthrightly as possible, I'm just going to say, as very specific as many pieces of our state statutes are, I find define reasonable time. What might be reasonable to me might not seem reasonable to someone sitting there. So we're going to, as a group, define what we feel is reasonable so that everybody knows. It should reflect the opinion of the elected body, not any one person's opinion about what reasonable is. And the board is going to discuss and establish what is reasonable, and then that's how we'll go forward with the testimony. Just for a frame of reference for nearby communities, how they handled their hearing of doing this the same way. Both Eudora and Wellsville used their public comment policy time. For Eudora, that's 5 minutes. For Wellsville, their public comment policy time is 3 minutes. So they just used that for the hearing. Paola used 5 minutes. Ottawa allowed 5 minutes. Douglas County allowed 3 minutes. So there's kind of a range of what nearby geographic entities deemed as being reasonable. So I will open the floor to discussion for the board of how we will define reasonable.
And our current practice for public meetings has been 5 minutes?
Our current practice for normal public comment is 3 minutes. Mhm. Sorry, I should have mentioned
I
that.
hate to get outdone by Eudora, so I propose 5. Maybe 5.5.
5.5? 5.5? What does everybody else think? It could, yeah,
Susan trying to talk, does it sound like? Maybe not.
it says talking.
Yeah, it sounded like I heard a muffled little unspeakered voice.
Thank you for catching that.
Super hearing. Can't see her.
Susan, are you trying to say something?
I didn't say no.
No, she says no.
Okay, okay. Just want to make sure. All right, what's everybody else think? So far, we have 5.5 minutes.
I'm okay with 5.
I'm okay with 5.
And this isn't limiting the number of people who can speak, it's just saying the duration for each individual wants to speak.
Right, that should be part of what we define too.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I think 5 is fine, yeah.
Okay. I think everyone should be allowed the opportunity to speak. I think everybody should, anybody who's here who wants to speak, I believe should. Once everybody gets one turn, I think that's fair. And I like the idea of exceeding our normal 3-minute public comment policy for the purposes of tonight. Everyone comfortable with that? I would like a motion so that we have it on the record.
I'll make a motion that we allow public comment tonight to extend to as many people as would like to speak for one opportunity for a total of 5 minutes for each person.
Second.
Phil has moved and Tony has seconded to allow public testimony, comment, or questions time to be up to 5 minutes, 1 turn per person for as many people who would like to do that, and not capping that. Like, we're not going to stop at an hour. We'll do it until everybody's had their chance.
Should we clarify too that, like, while somebody's talking, maybe other people shouldn't interrupt them, right? Whether it's us or anybody in the gallery, that 5 minutes is sacrosanct and that's their time to talk.
Correct. This is our opportunity to listen. That's what guides our normal public comment time. That should guide tonight. That is an adherence to statute. And so this is not our time to go back and forth. This is our time to prioritize listening to everything each patron wishes to share, ask, or say. And then when we get to the point of our board discussion, I know I'll be taking notes, I'm sure you will be too, then that becomes a component of our board discussion. I think that's an important clarification. We want to have a good professional discussion of the highest level of civic engagement that is an example worthy to our students. So yes, Mr. Finkeldye. Yes.
So there'll be a separate hearing on budget, which everyone can speak on the budget as well.
Correct.
So maybe you probably see, obviously, taxes and budget on the way.
Sure.
But understand this is the revenue meeting in the next hearing that time.
Thank you for that point of clarification. And this is not a substitute for the next. We really want to make sure everybody has their opportunity, but that is an important clarification.
If everybody doesn't know, Brad, you want to introduce him?
Yes, sorry. This is Brad Finkeldye. This is our district attorney, and he was going to make sure that we do everything correctly. That's important. Okay, so we have a motion to define what reasonable amount of time is. It was moved by Phil, seconded by Tony. All those in favor of approving the motion as presented, please say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 7-0. All right. So at this time, we will move to our public testimony. Feel free to step forward, or you can remain seated, whatever you're most comfortable with. And Megan will keep time for us, if you can, Megan.
If you wanted to also say your name out loud for the last, so I can get it on the record.
Yes, please. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself when you step forward, and then go from there. Thank you.
Thanks, Board. My name is Michael Kennedy, and I am running for school board this year. Part of my platform is responsibility and taxation. Last year, after USD 348 tried to raise local taxes by 16%, I filed an appeal against them because they did not follow the proper procedure to pass a motion that stated they were exceeding the revenue neutral tax rate. I prevailed in that appeal to the benefit of all taxpayers besieged by rampant abuse of local entities who use rapid increase in valuations to explode their budgets. Yet despite this board tax appeal requiring USD 348 return approximately $660,000 to taxpayers, they were still able to increase tax levies by 4.25% last year. And when it came time to determine which tax accounts they would adjust for the refund, they selected the supplemental LOB, as you heard, account for the reduction rather than reducing their bonded interest tax account, where there is currently a healthy surplus, and where they were and they still are collecting more taxpayer dollars than is needed to meet their bond obligations. This was followed by some letters sent out by the district blaming me for their mistake in both public and private forums to anyone who would listen, rather than taking public accountability themselves. A letter in August talked about transferring $340,000 from our reserve and $327,000 in budget reductions through a staffing freeze and deferred school safety, as you just heard. Some should blush for choosing to pad the bond account in advance of a bond election at the expense of school safety. Yet amazingly, at the end of fiscal year 2023, after moving $600,000 from the reserve to the LOB, washing it down through the spending accounts that they could, USD 348 had $7.1 million in total cash reserves, whereas at the same time in 2022, they had $6.2 million. So that's right, despite all of this, despite a $660,000 refund that we were granted, USD 348 was still richer by $943,000. $426,000 of that was a cash increase that was attributed to overcollection of bond and interest and their capital funds. And the remaining $517,000 was due to overfunding of accounts supplied by the general or supplemental LOB, including money from local levies. So again, they got richer out of this. What this tells me, taxpayers, board members, and superintendent, is you are overtaxing the patrons of that USD 348. The plan you're proposing tonight is also going to overtax us, impacting the most vulnerable in our community who are barely making it in this economy. Our general levy, which represents about 60% of our operating budget, is increasing 11%. We can't avoid that increase. It's well spent to pay our teachers higher salaries. Unchecked, our LOB would increase 8.4% over the amount they targeted last year. Capital outlay is to increase by 10.3% this year over last year. I urge the board to make cuts to the bond and interest account by adjusting the mill levy to 11.25%. Based on the plan I presented to Superintendent Dodge a few weeks ago, I urge you to consider and approve this plan tonight, as it would save taxpayers $3 million over 5 budget cycles and pay off our bonds 3 years earlier than you just published, 2030. You pay them off by 2027. I also urge you to reduce the supplemental LOB by at least $1 million or $138,000. It's obvious that your stated budget expenditures will not meet or exceed the collections from the state and the community, and you will again be using these over collections to pad your account reserves at year end, just like you did last year. Please reduce these levies. I am making a modest proposal. If enacted, USD 348 would still have an increase in its local tax levies of 17% over 2 years, over a 2-year period. I believe that an 8 or 9% increase per year is more than any of us get in our own personal budgets. Make it work for USD 348. Thank you.
Who would like to go next?
I'm Richard Michael. I just have a question.
Can you say your name again? Sorry.
Bob Murphy.
Bob.
Richard Michael.
It's Richard.
I have this thing here, and I would appreciate, because I'm not a very smart person, okay? I look at this, your presentation, comparison of mills. I look at this. This is mill levies. These are prepared by the county, I assume, but the names here do not match these here, 1 for 1. And it's hard for me to understand why I have to try to do a conversion process. When you guys have all this information, the board, everybody else, I want to be able to say, oh, here's general. Oh, that's this line here. Oh, here's capital outlay. Oh, that's this line here. But see, your USD 348 Baldwin City, it's 2022 rate is 20.385. I have no idea what USD 348 Baldwin City is. Well, I think it's the LOB, but it doesn't match. What I have here from the county does not match what's here. Now, I'm perplexed because either the county is misrepresenting what's happening, or USD 340 is misrepresenting the mill levies and funds. To me, I'm an old geezer. I have probably 10 years left on this earth if I'm lucky, but you guys are taxing the hell out of me. Not just you, but every taxing agency. You know, there's no creativity involved in anything, no critical thinking about anything anymore. When I worked in the corporate world, you know what they did? My CEO made $14 million a year. You know how creative he was about getting the balance sheet to look good, lay people off. Here, what you guys do is bonds and mill levy. You guys are gonna tax me out of my house. And it's not a funny issue. I talked to somebody here once, and they thought it was funny when I said that. It's not a funny matter. I've lived in my house since 1988. Now, the superintendent may make $167,000 a year, whatever he makes. He can afford these increases because it's a drop in the bucket for him. But for me, it's money that I do not have.
Sir,
And if you guys feel
I'm sorry to
comfortable with
interrupt
that,
you.
that's great.
We'll come back to this. This is what I was talking about at the beginning. We'll come right back to this. I'm going to call a recess for this first meeting so that I can move to the second meeting. We're going to come right back to you, sir. I'm sorry that's abrupt, but we're right at 6:30 and I have to follow
So we're at the
the
end
law.
of-
I paused
No.
your comment time.
Yeah, your
We're
comment.
recessing the hearing so that
Just
we
the hearing.
can follow the timing protocol for the budget hearing, and we'll come back to
This second
the
budget
R&R.
special
We're not
meeting,
done.
I'm calling to order. It is 6:30. So for the special budget meeting that will happen later, is officially called to order. May I have an approval of the agenda for the second meeting, please? So moved, and Chris has seconded. All those in favor of approving the agenda for our second meeting, please say aye and raise your right hand. Motion carries. I'm now recessing that meeting. I've got to put that one on ice, and now we're back in the first. So I'm calling back to order. It's 6:31. We are recessed for the second meeting, and now we are back in the first meeting. I'm sorry for the interruption. Your time can continue. We're back to order in the first meeting. Well, I didn't. I didn't. You were talking about the expense, and that the last thing you said was you were talking about that we speak the language of bonds and mill levies. That was,
I'll probably be moving out of my house. And I'll have to thank every one of you all, including Tony, you're my friend, but I'll have to thank you, pat you on the back for making me move. I appreciate it. Every one of y'all, I appreciate your creativity and your thinking out of the box. And clearly, you knew, you guys still make money because there was 17%. I think one year a 17% increase in valuation average, and last year it was 10%. Yeah, it decreased by 7%, but guess what? It's still 10% more than you had at some other point in time in life. So yeah, you lost a little bit of money, but not really, because you gained 10% on valuation of people's property. Yet you guys want to increase the mill levy to suck more money out from me. You know, Douglas County's doing a damn good job of taking my money for my property, and you guys just hop on the bandwagon. You know, you guys just think we are in the supply of funds for whatever desires you have. You know, whatever you want is tax and spend, tax and spend. I'm a Democrat, and on this, I'm a Tea Party guy. Yeah, believe me, tax and spend has got to quit. You know, bottom line, if you're on fixed income, tax and spend is not sustainable. That's all I have to say. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
who else would like to speak?
Is there going to be any kind of presentation for the budget?
When we go back to that meeting, yes. This is just the revenue neutral rate part, but then we'll do all of this again with a separate presentation for the budget. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. On September the 6th,
I'm sorry.
I sent a memo to USD
Could you give me your
348.
name?
Oh, sorry. Ruth Miller. Sorry about that. You ready? On September 6th, I sent a memo to Superintendent Dodge and to the school board members. And now they've received it, and I have received a response back from Superintendent Dodge. But I thought as a reminder of what I said, to the school board. And for the benefit of those who are here, I thought I would reread that memo at this time. Okay. And here's what my memo said. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
This is what my memo said. Upon receiving the letter from Superintendent Dodge telegraphing a substantial proposed increase in the USD 348 budget for 2023-24, followed by the property tax notice received from Douglas County Clerk's Office, I was disappointed and frustrated, especially so seeing what the USD 348 proposal will do to my property tax burden where I live. My total property tax burden increased over $400, of which approximately 60% being in support of the school district. Your proposed increases come at a time when individual and family budgets are under stress due to the increased cost of everything from laundry soap and toothpaste to food, gas, and utilities, and back to school supplies. In managing our individual and family budgets, we have to make choices, sometimes hard choices, between wants and needs. Unlike a public taxing body, which can increase revenues by increasing the mill rate or leaving the mill rate flat and relying on increased property values to generate more revenue. We as individuals or businesses must trim our budgets to find ways to work harder and smarter to meet our obligations. Many property owners in our school district are senior citizens on fixed incomes. We have many farmers who are constantly fighting against weather, government regulations, and increased costs in most everything associated with farming. Also, working households who find any increase in wages deflated because of the high cost of goods and services. Individuals and business owners have to figure out ways to live within their means. So too should our taxing bodies. Yet, when the school district is questioned about its increased budget proposal, the general response is usually, it's for the kids or it's for the students. I too want students to achieve above academic success. I understand the public school system requires public funds to operate. However, according to a recently released academic year 2022 student achievement report from the Kansas Policy Institute, only 19% of our high school students were college and career ready in math, with 27% college and career ready in English language arts. While the overall school grade for Baldwin Junior High went from a D to a C, showing positive improvement, the overall grade at the high school level remained at a D, and the elementary intermediate center remained at a C. Additionally, data shows that higher per pupil spending does not correlate to higher student academic achievement. I ask that the board members take a hard look at the 23-24 budget to separate true academic needs towards student academic success from mere wants, putting wants aside in meeting the board's vision statement of 1, providing a rigorous, balanced education where all students can reach their full potential, and 2, being good stewards of public funds, allocating funds strategically. The 2023-24 increased tax burdens you are proposing on property owners within USD 348 are truly burdensome and irresponsible. Now, do I have any more minutes left? I guess I do. I would like to say I did get a response from Superintendent Dodge, which I appreciated. He did say that it was not their intention to overtax, but rather to maintain efforts to continuously improve while absorbing increased costs and new legal obligations. My property tax is going up
Can I
to the
stop you right
point.
there? I'm sorry. If I let you go for 5.5 minutes, then I'm
Okay.
gonna have to let everybody go.
My property taxes are, as a senior citizen, have been increased to a burden. Thank you.
Who would like to speak next?
Expanded hearing, and every year we go through this with the budget. And, you know, one of the things I would like to know is how much money was wasted when you segregated our children in Whitewood? That's something that I really would like to know. And then the other thing is, if you talk about waste, this very building in the last 12 years, at least that I know of, over $500,000 has been wasted on this building, a brand new building. So the other thing is, there is plenty of contractors here in Baldwin City. Never ever does a school consider using local contractors. Don't even ask them for a bid. You're wasting thousands of dollars by using union contractors, contractors from Missouri or far away from Baldwin City, where we have plenty of contractors here in town. Yet never ever do you guys consider even asking local contractors. You expect all of us to pay more taxes for the school. But then when it comes down to work that needs to be done on the building, you don't even consider anybody local. And I think that that is a very big problem. I think what you guys have done in the last couple of years to our children, knowingly and willingly harms our children. And I think that that's a problem, and that's beyond the increase. I think none of us can keep spending like we would like to spend because of the whole economic situation. Why would you guys be able to constantly spend more and more money, and part of that is really being wasted? And I think that that's really something that you guys should look into.
I'm Louis Reinhardt. Mike Kennedy proposed that he submitted a proposal to Mr. Dodge, and I was wondering if that could be shown to us, what that is.
It's part of your budget packet.
It's in here? Okay. And if you could maybe explain to us and give us an explanation as to how that budget could work or not work.
It's part of the budget presentation. We'll get there. I'm not trying to be rude, but this is about the R&R side. So I'm not trying to be rude to you, but yeah, I do plan to address that.
Okay.
Would anyone else like to speak at this time regarding, yes, ma'am?
Charisse Laughlin. Bear with me, because I've just jotted down notes that might kind of go scatter one way or the other, but we're all shareholders here, and USD 348 needs to listen and stop being tone deaf to the community. Last year, the people attending the hearing pleaded with you to not exceed the revenue neutral rate. You didn't listen, you voted for it. The school bond failed, as the community said no. The community is maxed out on taxes. We all have to look at needs and not wants. An example of a want that I saw, well, didn't see it on your proposal, but I've heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we're getting a new FFA program. That is very costly. Don't get me wrong, I totally support FFA. My kids were in FFA. My son-in-law is an FFA teacher for over 15 years. But it's costly, it's new, it's not a necessity, it should not be funded. Not until there's funds that are not taking extra tax dollars. What is being cut out to provide for this program? Probably nothing, just more cost. Again, a want, a very nice want, but not a need. I don't feel you're good stewards of the monies when the community has asked for the spending to not increase. I fear that low-income families will be forced out of the district with higher taxes. Then how will an equitable education for all be provided? How are we as taxpayers supposed to continue to live in this community? when was the last audit performed and made public? Maybe that needs to be done. I saw listed on a fund for activity uniforms. Why? That used to be a fundraiser type activity and very well could still be one. As Ms. Kelly there had said earlier, something to the fact of set a standard worthy of our students, then don't have the standard of no, not meaning no. The community has said no over and over. Please do not do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Who else would like to speak?
My name is Ken Snyder. I spoke last month, except I got there was a news article published just a couple days ago by the US Census Bureau, and I thought it was, first part was pretty relevant, stating real median household income after taxes fell 8.8% from 2021 to 2022, and the poverty rate after taxes, as measured by the supplemental poverty measure, increased 59%, up to 12.4%. So this is 2021 to 2022 data, but it's the latest we have available. I don't think it's going to be any better for this year. And it just highlights the fact that families are hurting. We don't have, due to inflation, the dollar doesn't go as far as it used to. And, you know, for my family personally, it's going to be tough trying to figure out how to come up with extra money for taxes this year. When I spoke up at the county commissioners meeting last month, I told them it would be quite easy to cut money out of their budget. I'll admit school board is harder, you know, because there's just not as much fluff as what the county puts into their budget. But I'm running for school board next year and love to take a shot at it, and we'll love to help you out. Thanks.
Thank you. Who else?
My name is Greg Bruce. We have a shop downtown, mechanic shop. Just so you know, we recently were able to purchase our building. And however, finding all this tax stuff is new to me. I'm a mechanic, I fix things. I'm a car guy. And then understanding that now that I own my building, it costs me $500 a month just for the privilege of owning that building. More than half of that goes to the school. And I have to run my business such that we don't spend more money than what we take in. And I don't know a whole lot, and I'm not a good accountant, so I can't crunch all of your guys' numbers and figure that out. I do hear some things, the bond issues that you've had in the past, that's why I asked. I'm kind of curious where that money went. And if the school spent that much money, how do you still have, well, I don't know what he said, $7 million in the bank or something? And why is it necessary that the way I understand this revenue neutral thing is that it's supposed to be a law, and it doesn't make sense to me how it's neutral. I don't understand that. But now you're looking at raising that. So that $500 a month is going to go up more. And it trickles down into, I mean, all of you. If you get cars fixed and I have to pay my bills, I have to raise what we're charged. And I know that's a universal understanding, but I just don't know if a lot of people understand how much that really is. And in addition to that, the county also raised our valuation of our building by 70%. So not only is it going up because of this thing you guys are doing, but the property valuations are going up. We have a handful of customers that have noted to us they have to move out of this district because they can no longer afford to pay the taxes to stay in their house. We were looking at purchasing a house. I want to stay in Baldwin, but I don't know I can afford to live in Baldwin. I'm going to have to go to another county or at least out of the school district. And I don't know how long our business is going to survive to where it's at. It may end up closing, I don't know. And that's also a sales tax revenue for the county of Baldwin as well. We toss a gob of sales tax going in every month. just so you guys understand where we're coming from. And I know you guys have houses also, and you pay taxes and all that. I don't know if we get hit double because we're in the city as well as in the school district and not out in the country. So we get hit a lot harder than that. Just FYI. I would think there would be some way. I did send an email to all of you. I got a response from a couple of you about the grants that are out there and available. If that would be some other kind of funding that could be used to avoid things like this and reduce some of the tax burden on us would be great. And I'd like the plan about paying off the bonds early. I think that would be fantastic. I mean, the better we can live without owing money somewhere, the better it would be. Thank you.
Thank you. So, there we go.
Buck Bradley, I'm also running for school board. So something I didn't see in the presentation, it talked about mills, but didn't talk about the increase of property values over the years, which should be considered. You guys raised 27% over the last 2 years. Most of you are business owners, or at least half of you or more are business owners. I cannot pretend, if you raise your rates that much and not communicated that properly, I could just walk away and go to a different business. The same law you guys are complaining about that you lost taxes from not doing stuff properly is the same law that will be used to seize our property if we decide not to pay or can't pay. I've talked to a lot of people as I'm running, going to door. I talked to 16 people yesterday, knocked at 16 houses. 10 of them brought up themselves the lack of trust and transparency in the board. The bond showed that as well. 55% voted against it. I heard it being said, they didn't understand what they were getting. I don't think you guys are understanding that there's a lot of lack in trust. This presentation is a legal requirement. Your lawyer's here, it's making sure it's done. But you guys are not doing anything else to explain to me or the citizens are out here of how it's being spent. My undergrad is in finance from the University of Kansas. I can look at this stuff, I can read it, but most people can't. I have a master's degree as well. Put it in basic, simple, layman's terms. Most people out there are farmers, good working, hard people out there all the way through. It's bare minimum. You missed a perfect opportunity to communicate the other day when that letter was sent out. Hey, this is the reason. Nothing said, hey, this is where the extra money's going to. I know you guys are looking at giving a good pay raise to the teachers. That's what we want to hear, where the money's going. Nobody is mad about that. We all think our teachers are underpaid, but they don't know. We don't know. So there's a huge lack of trust. Again, you've heard the numbers, you've heard everything else. What are we doing over and over again? This tax increase is perceived as a punishment by some people because the bond fell. Plain and simple. That's what I'm hearing. And perception is reality. Whether it be true or not, I think you all are good citizens and stuff like that. We may disagree on execution and stuff like that, but I don't think you're trying to actually punish the people here because a bond fell. But that is perception out in the community. I used to run organizations in the military that was 1,000 people strong. Never did I get in trouble for over communicating and talking to the public. You have no communication plan to explain what we're doing, what you're doing. I want to support you. I want to help. That's why I threw my name in the hat, because we've got to communicate to people out here how it's done. You never get in trouble for communicating too much. Maybe on the battlefield, but in this classroom, you don't. You don't get in trouble for communicating too much. Again, I know it probably won't change it. I know it probably won't do it, but just please consider that as you go through and look at that. My taxes went up 13%, roughly 60%, 67% is because of the school board. Again, I got kids in the district. I believe there should be a fine balance between taxation and education. My salary for 21 years is paid by taxpayers' dollars. I understand sequestration, all the other stuff hurt me on the ends too. I lived in some crappy barracks. I had crappy gear because we were funded by the taxpayers. So that's all I got, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I think I'd like to speak a little more too. You know, we talked about.
You didn't speak for 5 minutes before.
I just like to say, you know, somebody had mentioned the more underfunded people that don't earn this much money, and most of those people are renters, and a lot of the parents here that have kids in school are not homeowners, and they're not really well represented here today. And if if housing costs keeps going up for everybody, and taxation is a big part of that, then it's driving just more and more people out of our district because of the rent going up so much that the average people just can't even afford it. And a lot of these rents that I see, these people are moving out. What's moving in is what's taking their place is some Baker students and other people like that don't, help our district. So, just further increasing taxes is not helping those people in any way either. I think they're right now as overburdened as anybody.
Anyone else? Again, just a reminder, yes, sir, go ahead and come forward. That this is part one of our statutory requirement for this evening. And the second part is the budget part, which is going to drill down into the level of detail of questions that are coming up. But we're also keeping track of other questions that are being discussed here. Yes, sir.
My name is Murray Anderson. I'm a retired attorney. I actually served on the Blue Valley School Board Advisory Board for 13 years. So I can appreciate what you're dealing with school districts that are growing so fast you can't even fund them. So I really do appreciate that. I think the concern that we have, and I did tax protests and appeals for a number of years, and the sensitivity with people, who are on fixed income and stuff is a real issue. And now with rampant inflation, a lot of people are wondering. I've got a daughter who says, "Can I hang on?" She lost her job. She's with Yellow Freight, and they laid off 30,000 people. So those are issues that are real. And I guess what I would just ask you to really be sensitive with the revenue neutral position, because these are, and it may be that, our economy will change and we won't have this rampant inflation. But right now, I just think it's a real issue. And I think all of you probably remember when reappraisal went in back on part of it in the 70s, and the boards, most of the district or the boards, county commissioners, all assuring everybody, don't worry about your tax raising. Once the revenue goes up, we'll drop the mill. It doesn't happen. And so I guess in that sense, I just ask you to really take a hard look at it, be sensitive to the people like myself now that own fixed income. So every day when you look at taxes or food and all those become an issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name is Bill Merriam, and looking at this sheet that was handed out here, even you look at the actual budget for 21-22 compared to the 23-24, there's a 27% tax increase in your budget there alone. And if you go to the U.S. Department of Labor website, our inflation rate for the last few years has been about 16%. And I understand costs go up, but we are in inflation times right now, and people are struggling trying to meet their budgets and their expenses, and it's to go above the revenue neutral goal set here that you guys are proposing. I think it's really unfair to the public right now, and I think that we all have to tighten our belts, and it doesn't seem like a lot of our government agencies do that. I've looked at my city taxes in I moved here and bought a house in 2016, and in 7 years, my taxes have gone up 102%. With the city, they've gone up 101% with the county. And then you guys are up about 45% for me. And that's just in a 7-year period. And it's like those numbers are just, the state stays the same. Palmyra actually, district has decreased. They've adjusted for their needs, but it doesn't seem like a lot of our government agencies and school districts are adjusting for those adjustments as our property increases. And it just doesn't seem, I think what I'm feeling from the people I talk to is we're being, while times are good, and while our housing is going up, then our government agencies are pulling in the money that they can, and to go above revenue neutral seems excessive to me. And I totally believe in schools. I totally believe it. I have 3 kids, 2 of them went to college and 1 didn't. And the ones that went to college have excelled in their careers. The one that didn't, she's excelled in her career. So, but I just think that the schooling is very important at these levels. And, but I think that we have to be careful of how we spend people's money. And we've heard a lot of us, I'm retired, I'm on fixed income. And, but I know that if I don't tighten my belt in tough years, then it's gonna be tough for me to make it. And I don't see our government agencies and our school districts doing that. I see them, I look at my taxes since I moved in, and I've never seen a decrease in my property taxes since I've moved in, even years ago. So that's what I would ask that you guys just really consider the hardship that people are in right now. And I know you understand that and are hearing that, but I still hear an excessive amount of above this revenue neutral proposal that you're asking for, and it just doesn't make sense to me. So, but I love Walden. I love living here. Since I moved here, it's been a great community. And I feel the same. I actually have been snooping around to see if I can find a cheaper place to live. And mostly because of taxes. And the first thing I look at is what taxes are. So, and I moved from Colorado. I have a daughter that's paying $4,000 on a $700,000 home. And I'm paying $3,000 on a $200,000 home. So it just seems like it's excessive. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak?
One comment about the revenue neutral. My name is Nancy Chris, and I just want to remind you all that revenue neutral is fairly new. It's recent. It was enacted by our state legislators because taxpayers needed relief, because people like those who talked today went to their legislators and said, this is what we want. We're your constituents. We want some relief from the constant increase of taxes in our local areas. What can you do to help us? And they found a way. And revenue neutral is a balance, is a check and balance on these kind of local things that happen, where at a higher level, they've put something in place that can provide some relief. And to ignore that is to ignore your constituents and to ignore that exists for a reason. So as citizens, I hope that you all will just remember why there is a revenue neutral ruling.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? All right. I believe reasonable time has been offered for this discussion. Thank you for, oh, we've got one more. Yep.
My name is Stacy Anderson, and I, like everybody sitting here in this room, has very big concerns about where we are heading in this county. I know at least 12 families that have already moved because they have been taxed out to the max that they can't afford to live here. I know at least that many more who are planning on moving, and they're going to go ahead and pull their kids out of this school because we cannot afford to live here. It is across the board. Everything has run up except people's wages. We are at a time in this world where everything costs so much that we have to make a decision. Are we going to pay our rent, or are we going to put food on the table? I have a very severe illnesses, a lot of them, and that costs a lot of money. So am I going to get my medication, or am I going to make sure that my kid has school supplies and clothes to go to school? Am I going to put food on the table, or am I going to get my medication? We should not, as a community, have to make these decisions because you guys have money in reserve. It's not that you guys are hurting. You guys are mismanaging the money. You have been collecting money for years, and you have that, and you choose not to use it in the appropriate way that it should have been done. You guys wanted a stadium and the whole bond thing. Guess what? There is ground there. Why can't you build around the Merle Venable Sports Complex and make a stadium if that's what you want, instead of trying to get it out of a bond? And since the bond didn't pass, you guys are trying to do this bull crap. And I want to know, is your decision already made? Because it seems to me, the way that this is written, and you're throwing in their lack of security and safety and blah, 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 all of that stuff was in the bond. So has the decision already been made, and you're just snowballing us to come in here and talk to you and to bring our voices, to tell you how frustrated as a community we are as a whole? And most people will not come in here and say anything and voice their voices and their complaints about how badly we're struggling as a whole community, because they're afraid of repercussion, either repercussion that their city utility bill is going to be increased in some way, that they might get pulled over by the cops. If they have kids in school, maybe their kids aren't going to be treated as nicely because their parents spoke out about it. I've been very vocal, Kelly, and you know that. I have been vocal with everybody. I had tried to talk to Mr. Dodge about an incident that happened with my daughter last year. She was bullied by a teacher and physically hurt. He pinched her. He's still working in the schools. I don't understand what you people are doing and how you can say it's the kids first and we care about the kids and this is all for the kids when our kids are being bullied by students, being bullied by teachers. They are failing. Teachers are putting hands on them. And you guys have a whole stack load of money somewhere and it is not going where it needs to go. Our kids are failing. My daughter came from homeschooling and she had an A in every class, and last year she failed math because you do not meet the criteria that Greenbush that you used for the high school last year. This year, because I talked to Greenbush and I said, this is not right that only high school students get the opportunity to use Greenbush if they are not doing well to get extra help in learning. And it's not fair that the other kids do not have that opportunity as well. Well, this year they've started and it's from 6th to up to the high school. I think it should be available for every kid. When our kids are failing and there is a lack of, I want to know where the money is. Where is the money that you guys have that you are asking us to put out more, but you have that money and you are failing and have failed miserably for years to do any improvements or put in a stadium. You put in a track that's not even regulation and you could have put that in and made it correctly and we would have had our own. You want to compare us to every other town around here because they have their own stadiums. Well, guess what? They were smart when they were building their school and they put it in. You guys have had over 20-some years to put that in place. But now you're wanting to put the burden on us. We're getting hit from every direction. Everything has went up. Utilities, water, cable, insurance, our home rates, property taxes. We are struggling as a community, not just the elderly, not just the young. Everybody is struggling, except it seems to be you guys. Now, Mike has come up with a very good proposal, and I don't understand why you guys won't even take the opportunity or the time to go, you know what, this actually makes sense, and it will ease the burden on the community members so that our community members who have been long-standing here and some who have just moved here find out, you know what, we can't afford to live here because this place is outrageously high. You won't even listen to his proposal to try and make it easier on the community because the community has kids in this school district. It's not just the elderly people, it's everybody. You know what, I'm gonna finish what I'm gonna say. You need to stop taxing us. Use the money that you have and keep it off of the community and our pocketbooks because we cannot make it this way.
Thank you, Stacy.
Absolutely cannot.
We've listened above the 5 minutes, and we want to make sure you have your chance to finish your sentence. At this time, we're going to conclude the public testimony. Everyone who wants to has had the opportunity to speak, and we're going to conduct our business at this point. Okay, there are many statements that have been made. This is the opportunity for the board to discuss. Keeping in mind that Ideally, I would like all of this to be one thing because several of the questions that came up are actually a statutorily required part of our budget hearing. And I know that's hard to keep it separate, even though it is very much interconnected. But the part of that is required as far as setting caps to then pivot and be able to talk about the budget is this step. And that is board discussion regarding the resolution to exceed the revenue neutral rate. The floor is open for discussion. Feel free to, among the board, if there's anything anyone would like to say or add or answer, this is the time to do that.
Can we include Nate?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Nate, where's the $7.1 million that's been alluded to? As a way that we're sitting on a pile of cash, there's $7.1 million somewhere that we don't know about.
Various funds. So, always gonna be
Your part's there.
So it's in majority of funds, it's spread over funds, for example, bond.
But it is there.
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
Is that separate entry in your spreadsheet?
So this is our board discussion time, guys. So let's answer the question in its entirety. Let's extrapolate on that.
So when it's in bond and interest, can you use it for anything else?
No, it's just for bond.
Just for bond. And what percentage of that is in bond and interest?
I think as of right now, I think we just got done paying one of our payments, so there's about 2.4 million.
2.4 million. So even if we wanted to, you couldn't take that money out.
I can't,
Put that
yeah,
towards
I
something
couldn't
else.
buy a bus or I couldn't build a field for that, unless it was in a bond program. And then other various funds like special education, CTE, textbook curriculum, those things.
Part of what makes this confusing too is that there are limitations on, you can't just move things from one column to the next. Some areas you can, but there are also a lot of limitations on what you can move. One thing that I heard that came up, well, there were several things, but we have dropped mills historically. And, you know, this ongoing conversation that is very valid and very real, and many of you spoke very respectfully about that. When you talk about the needs of everyone dealing with the cost of living in this environment, that's everybody. We are also people who sit here and live here and pay these same taxes too. But the particular point of concern for how all of these decisions do affect everyone, but most especially those who are already at the margins, those who are on fixed income. That's a real thing. At the same time, when we come into a conversation of separating needs and wants, this board unanimously approved a needs assessment, which is also required as part of our process. And we're going to get into that more with the next discussion, I know. But it is a balance between two very important populations. Our students and the needs that the district has determined that they have educationally and everything else. So I do want to invite us to not run away from that discussion by any means. But for the purposes of getting to the next part where we can really discuss that part, we have to complete this step first.
To stay rate, revenue neutral rate, what are we, what does that look like? I mean, like, what are we giving up?
Well, I mean, obviously funds from.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're not, we don't know the total difference between the two.
So I don't necessarily have a question in this, but I guess I just feel compelled to comment, and that, you know, listening to the comments tonight, you know, tore at my heartstrings, to be honest with you, just because, you know, one, and this is, you know, I'm 2 years into this and it's been a valuable learning experience sitting on this board and being in a volunteer role. And we all, I know, probably can relate to this, that we sit in a chair in a volunteer manner with good intentions, trying to balance and manage so many different wants and needs and opinions and feelings and situations. And, you know, I'm not going to get into, you know, a long in-depth, you know, tax or political discussion in this setting. But, you know, I believe similarly to many of you and have frustrations with our tax system from top to bottom. And it doesn't change sitting on the seat. I learned that some of the restrictions and some of the things and the ways that the school district has got to manage and limited usage for funds and special education and things that just are mandated makes it challenging. I wish, honestly, every one of you that is being impacted by this could be exempt. You know, you don't have students in the schools anymore. You know, you've worked hard and gotten to a place in your life that I wish there was some point in all of our world that we became exempt and didn't have to be part of this conversation or funding mechanism. But that's not the system we live in, and so we've got to play the cards we're dealt. And we, as board members, I feel like have also the obligation of trying to help our district, you know, succeed and not just survive, but, you know, thrive. And that's what, you know, that's what the parents that have students in the district expect. That's what a lot of the community members, that's what people that are moving here with their families expect and want. It's why I came to this community, was the school district. And it's just challenging, and it's hard to sit in this spot and have to, you know, have to try to balance this, because everything you're speaking about, we're experiencing as well with the increased costs, but so is the school district. And, you know, and that's difficult. And so anyway, some of the things, I'll speak to the FFA program as an example. That's something that this sitting board is very proud of. And if you knew how many times we've been chattered at, why is Baldwin City, this rural community, sitting here without that? And how are we letting that happen? And you know, in the big scheme of things, yeah, does it cost money? But it's very small compared to, you know, many things that we have to fund and deal with. So we're very proud that there's, you know, an ag program and an FFA program coming to Baldwin City, and I think we're going to be better because of it. And then budget, you know, and some people spoke, you know, really very personally towards us, and you know, I apologize. I'm sorry you feel that way, but you know, we are truly sitting here trying to do good for our community and our school district in a volunteer role. And I wish we could, you know, somehow make everybody happy. But at the end of the day, I think we have to do what our leaders, our admin, tell us that they need in order to, you know, be relevant in the public school systems that we are leading, and within the area that we are also, I won't say competing with, but there is a new element to this, and that is open border school ruling that just came into effect this year, where, you know, it used to be, you know, you couldn't just go to school anywhere you want to, but now kids and families, they can send their kid anywhere they want to. And we gotta, you know, try to protect and make sure that we can keep our kids in our community, and make sure that we have, so I don't know that helps anything. I just feel compelled to say something. I took a lot of notes. I would encourage everybody that's in here to approach us and visit with us throughout the year, not just tonight after, you know, I mean, a lot of what you have to share, we can talk through them. Sometimes it could have some influence both directions. And I encourage that communication, because in this format, at this 12th hour of the decision making, sometimes it's difficult to completely sit down and reevaluate, the entire process. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Kelly. Are there other points of discussion?
Questions when it comes to the budget part, but the R&R part is pretty straightforward.
Yeah. One thing that I think is somewhat related to the R&R that I did want to make sure that came up in one of the comments was a question if we're ever audited. Just as a component of transparency, we are required to be audited every year. We have received the highest commendation every year. So that is a part of.
It's presented publicly at a board meeting.
It's presented, the audit is not just something that happens, it has to be presented to the board and accepted by the board. So I do want to assure, I'm not saying that's going to, involve universal agreement about all the other things, but having an open and transparent audit process is statutorily required, and we're happy to do that. It's part of our open meetings, it's presented to us, we have to review it in open session. Now that we're putting everything on YouTube and videoing all those meetings, in addition to being in the minutes, are also archived. Any of that you can always look up, and that's important that you all know that that information is happening all throughout the year. The budget process is not just what happens tonight. It is a process that truly is ongoing. And I'm sorry that people are feeling like it isn't transparent. I'm racking my brain trying to figure out how I could possibly, and how we could possibly be any more transparent. That doesn't mean that your opinion is wrong or that there aren't ways that we can and should continue to strive to do better. But there also is no intent to deceive or hide. There may be disagreement, but there is no ulterior motive for anything that we do. We may just have different ideas about how to best get there and doing what's best for the most people. But an annual audit is important. I wanted to make sure that was part of the record and to answer your question, ma'am, because that is part of the annual process.
Where is that, and where do I find it?
Back on YouTube, was it like in April, I think?
Yes, in the spring.
January.
It was the spring semester, and it happens every year. We will double check. I think, was it January or February?
The audit took place at the end of October.
But then when it was presented to us to where a patron could go look it up and view it.
I believe it was January.
Okay.
There's just a
We look it up.
gross assumption that
Thank you.
everybody has internet access, which may or may not be true.
That's true.
So there's got to be a better way.
But there are also the minutes, all of which, and those things I know can be accessed, yes, at our library, but also coming to our district office. Everything is on file and people are very happy to make sure.
I can't go there anymore.
Well, I don't want to get into all that in public session because that's okay. We have to have point of order when factual, let's not.
We've got to have other, the standards are flying more, it's online, YouTube, this, that. The reality is that's not always available to everybody here.
Well, the meetings are always open and you're always welcome to come.
Absolutely.
In reality.
Yeah.
You can't be, they've only been online on YouTube for, I think, since about the COVID stuff. When we moved out of the IC 4 years ago, that's when we started putting them online. So prior to that, it was always open. I mean, for the 2 or 3 years that I was on the board when we were at the IC, I think, I'm sorry, the PC, now we're at the IC. I think I probably had a total of 4 public comments. I mean, literally like 4. Nothing ever. It was one thing about sidewalks. And then in-town busing, or just in-town busing, the only things we ever talked about. But the board meetings have always been open, and it's sometimes there's nobody here, and so we sit up here and have our discussion, and it's all put online, and then people say, well, it's not open, you didn't do this. So to Kelly's point, there's short of like maybe sending somebody VHS tapes or of the meetings. I mean, I don't know what how you can make it more open. And I'm certainly open to any suggestions to make it more open.
I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
Just as you, had the bond issue included in the utility bill, why don't you go ahead and include that in the utility bill, so that gets to everybody, because everybody receives a utility bill.
So we're trying to be good stewards of tax money. You want us to spend all of that time and
So
money?
we found money to spend an endorsement for the bond being.
That was privately raised.
That has nothing to do with us, and I'm gonna interject. That has nothing to do really with the part of business that we're doing tonight.
So if we want to know about the audit, why can't it be included in the city bill?
That was part of a public comment that I was addressing as part of the testimony that was relevant.
Yeah, please send them to me in an email after this meeting. I'd love to get to them.
So, I mean, that would be a very good way.
Thank you. Is there other discussion?
Well, I know I asked this question last year. I'll make sure I ask it again, just to, and maybe it's good for everybody here to understand it, but we do this R&R hearing first, which has always been challenging for me.
Right.
But just regardless of what happens with this, we're just positioning ourselves to be able to, I guess, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, we're setting caps, essentially, maximums for the budget conversations that take place in the budget hearing.
Because it's the actual budget that's submitted that actually impacts the taxation.
When
Not
you
the
set,
the
when you set
R&R,
these,
whatever happens right here is not going to impact the
by
taxation.
exceeding the R&R, it allows us to identify specific mill levels that we can have in the budget discussion. You can always come down from those levels, but you can never go above them based on the conversation or what's approved at this time.
And as a point of reference, if my information is correct, this was reported in the journal where the state of Kansas, which created this statute, exceeded the revenue neutral rate. I don't know if there's awareness of that. So
I'm not sure of it. Well, there's not very many area.
It's very
government
small.
agencies that have not exceeded.
Correct. And so as that's related to the procedural lever step that's required for us to go on to the budget part, yes, Kelly, you are correct.
Yeah, it's pretty common standards to exceed the R&R, and then you work through your budget to submit for what actually takes place.
Once you do that, you can always come down from those mills.
Which we did last year.
Which we did last year.
Yeah.
I did think of one other question.
Yeah.
And maybe we don't know the answer to this part of it, but compared to other surrounding school districts, how close are we in the ballpark of number of mills compared to Wellsville, Eudora, others other folks around us? Do we happen to?
Give me 1 second, Chris. I think I can find that.
Okay, go ahead. I'm just out of
Why are we
curiosity.
always trying to compare ourselves to other communities? This is Baldwin, this is Wellsville, this is Eudora.
Well, that makes it okay, though. That's how it works. That doesn't mean it's right. Sure.
Exactly. So how does that correlate to, why are we trying to keep up with the Joneses? Seriously, we've had how many years to build a stadium, which is what you guys are, this is where this is heading. You guys are gonna approve this whether we object to it or not. You are going to tax the hell out of these people and all these.
Please
people
no swearing. That's not appropriate.
Because
Please.
this school is so great when we can't even give our kids.
Stacy, I appreciate your passion and your advocacy, and you can do all of that without swearing. That's fine, and you're entitled to your opinion. The public has had its opportunity. The public has had its opportunity. The public has had its opportunity, and you'll be asked to be removed. You have had your opportunity. We have listened. And let's just all take a deep breath, because listen, I know we may disagree. We're not enemies here, and we don't need to have swearing. That's too far. Okay. We're gonna keep it orderly, okay? We've heard you. We've heard you. All right. So a question was asked of a board member about surrounding.
And I'm looking for that
mills.
spreadsheet. and
Okay.
I'm struggling.
That's fine, yeah, it's not that big of a question. Just
No,
kind
but
of
I do
wondering
Well,
about general
part of the reason why
mill rates for.
I think that is relative, not because we're trying to be anybody else, because I am listening, and I do want to listen and meet you where you are, but it's got to be respectful and professional. But to merge what you're saying, and then also, why is that relevant? Our interlocal partnership is Baldwin, Eudora, and Wellsville. So when we set our budget and we have our special education interlocal with those two other schools, if we are miles apart on many things, it also makes the educational collaborations that are both legally, ethically, and budgetarily necessary to work if we're a million miles apart. That would be one relevant example of just taking a temperature, not because we're trying to be identical. We are Baldwin, but we also need to know what's happening around us to take the temperature. That helps make sure if you're far off course or if you're on the right track. That's always a good thing to check. That's why we, research. It isn't a copycat thing in that sense, for sure. But it is relevant for a lot of reasons, and I think a big reason is because of that. Does anybody see that differently?
No, just that, because that mill levy rate varies a lot by how much that pulls in, like per mill, how much money do we bring in varies compared to any other community, right? So like Ottawa, for instance, has a much bigger industry base, and so their mills generate more money because it just got more industry that can pay into that, right? So just thinking from a comparative sense, how in the spectrum of 0 to 100 or whatever those mill rates could be, I'm just out of curiosity wondering what our
I don't have the spreadsheet from the districts at this time. What I was looking at was last year's.
Those surrounding districts have their R&R meetings already.
Yours is tonight. I do not recall when Ottawa's was and Wellsville. I think theirs is coming up soon. The deadline for it is coming.
They all had theirs last week.
Yeah. And Lewisburg had theirs, what did they tell us? Last week.
It seems like we're doing this in reverse to me. Why are we?
The law, this is what the law requires. We don't like it either. We don't like it either. That's what the state mandates how we have to do that. We have to do.
It feels like,
I know.
The law
at your home, don't you decide to figure out your budget and then you pay the check? I mean,
the law allows for the budget and the R&R conversation to take place at the same time, but it doesn't require it.
It doesn't require one before the other.
It doesn't, no. It requires the R&R the exceeding of the R&R has to happen before a budget approval takes place. That part has to happen. Right. Some districts, you have the flexibility to have conversations at the same time. You could have your budget and R&R hearings concurrently.
You just guys did decide to do that.
Well, yes, and that's the KSDE, is the State Department of Education recommends you do it this way. We're following that protocol. And that's another reason why we have an attorney present.
What else do you have? Any other discussion? Got nothing? Not until the budget.
And so what we're looking for even right now is it's still less than what we asked for in 21, 22 minutes from the mill levies. Obviously
increased valuations.
Increased valuations,
right.
There's increased monetary, but at least from the mill levy, which is how we.
Correct.
All right.
It's the one that has the 348 mills, yeah, that.
Yep.
Yeah, and I mean, I think 2021, I think that that's what we said, we get back, I think, 2.35 mils, and again, that's our speak for money, and I know that that's not dollars and that's not percentage. I mean, that was a discussion because we didn't have to give that back. So I think somebody at one point in time said we never go down. Well, we did, and that was a big discussion because we could have stayed, kept that. I think that came out, a bunch of that came out of bond and interest because we had a bond that matured, get paid off, and so my argument at that time was, hey, look, we don't have any use for this money now. Let's give it back, and then that was the whole. I mean, so I'm kind of the scapegoat for the whole bond thing, and why, the reason why it was a mill levy neutral bond. Because, I argued to say, let's give that money back. And then we had to ask for money back. The school districts around us, Eudora, did a mill levy neutral bond because every time they have a bond mature, they just keep that money so that they're able to then continue to fund that so that they can come up with a mill levy neutral bond. We said as a board, like, hey, we don't have a good use for this money right now. We are not gonna collect it. And so we reduced mills, not because our operating costs went down, not because we paid teachers less, but because we had a bond mature. It didn't feel right to keep money that we were not putting towards a bond. So we gave those those mills back. So I am very fiscally conservative. And like Kelly used good words about tugging at heartstrings. I mean, you're a Tea Party guy tonight. I'm a Tea Party guy all the time.
No, I'm Tea Party when it comes to.
Yeah, okay, gotcha. I'm Tea Party everything.
All the time, not just.
Yeah. You know, so it's a really, really hard decision. There are no nefarious, I mean, up here, you know, we don't all agree all the time, but there is no nefarious slush fund trying to just like go crazy. We don't care about your money. We just want a new stadium. No, I mean, it's that we sat down. I mean, there was that whole bond issue, and I don't want to get back into that, but that was well thought out, well asked, you know, well, you know, rehearsed. Everything's, I mean, hours and hours and hours of time in the community talking to people. What do we need to do? So there's nothing about this that's easy to sit here and talk to your neighbors and friends. You know, if Greg leaves, my son Jack will never get to drive again because his car will, you know, so it's a really hard thing to sit up here and have to look at you guys and say, hey, look, you know, we as a school district, this is where we're at. But, you know, we've got a guy who's, you know, our financial guy, and he's saying this is what it's going to take. You know, we go through the budget. I'm not a budget guy. You know, I'm not a finance major. I don't even know how to do. You know, my math is not good, but we have to go through and talk about all of this. And it's hard. And please, whether this thing gets, you know, the revenue neutral rate gets surpassed or it gets held up or whatever, it's not a foregone conclusion, and it's not us not listening to you. It's about us trying to do what feels like the right spot for me as a board, this guy who's in help, you know, 1/7 in charge of the school district, trying to figure out what's best for the school district. You know, and like Kelly alluded to earlier, the open borders thing, that's going to be really difficult because, you know, here we are, you know, I don't have any social media, so whatever you post on Facebook, I don't see. My wife does. She shows me this guy's post from wherever the junior high played football, and he was like making fun of our football field because he's like, there's no bathrooms, there's no concession. If I was Baldwin, I'd be ashamed. You know, I thought, well, that's kind of apropos. But you know, we do have to compete, and you know, the school, like Chris just mentioned, we don't have a big industrial base. I wish we did. You know, if we had the Amazon intermodal right here, you know, property taxes, I mean, we wouldn't have to collect so much to keep the school running. But we don't have anybody to rely on except for you guys. I'm 100% in agreement with Kelly. It sucks to be, you know, my dad's a fixed income guy. He's gonna have to pay taxes, you know, and his taxes are going up. I would love to be here and be a fixed income guy someday, right? I mean, that's my goal is I want to be buried in my front yard. And it's gonna suck someday, but you know, it's really, really difficult to sit up here. So please, I know somebody said, oh, if you guys made this, you're just snowballing us, giving a chance. No, we're not. I mean, it's a really, really, really hard decision to do. And again, the R&R, like Kelly said, to make super clear, that does not mean that we could very well pass, you know, vote to exceed the R&R, you know, vote to give ourselves the authority to collect more money and then go through the budget and then not do that. Right? So I mean, this whole vote, it's 100% backwards. And last year was the first year of having to do this. You know, and that was the whole BOTA ruling thing. We had a grammatical syntax error in the manual. It wasn't that the BOTA slapped us down because we were evil or had some nefarious plot or we were doing something wrong. We read the motion wrong. So that, you know, I want to pour my heart out to you guys to let you know that, like, I mean, this is a hard spot to be. You know, I'm a little jealous that I'm more, you know, that I don't get to go leave with this. So this is a hard spot to be. I mean, you know, to go through all the stuff that we go through. But yeah, so please know that it's not just letting you guys talk and say stuff and we've got this little cabal of like, haha, we're gonna do this anyway. It's not. I mean, what you see here, and as far as being open, what you see here is all that ever happens. We don't have like behind closed doors meetings. There's no like secretive slush fund for us to go to Cancun when we all get off the board. You know, we've all been on the boards for varying lengths of time. You know, we're talking about, like, you know, what happened to this building, you know, 12 years ago. I don't think anybody, maybe Andy was on his first term, you know, back then. Nobody else is on the board. You know, 20 years ago with building a stadium, I was on the board back then. I'd have pushed to build a stadium then. I think it's ridiculous that they did. I have no control over the fact that the track is not irregulation. I think it should have been. I'm sure at that time somebody was in here complaining about wanting to build a stadium. You know, and probably 20 years before that, somebody was complaining about why are you wanting to build a stadium? 20 years from now, somebody's gonna look back and say, why did you guys build a stadium 20 years ago?
People were outraged at building the primary center.
Right.
That was not long after I moved here. We were out of room, you know, things happen, but to your point, none of us.
Anyway, I have a tendency to ramble, so.
No, it's okay, it's okay.
Dr. Harvey may comment to your
Sure.
So I do catch myself a budget guy, and well, you mentioned that the bond interest was lowered at a certain point in time. The proposal I put to you, and what I've spoken truthfully about to the public tonight, is you have been collecting more bond interest for the last 3 years than you're paying out every year. And as a result of that, your reserve account of bond interest has gone up over $800,000 over that period. So again, the start of this fiscal year, before you make your heavy payment for bond interest in the year, you're sitting on $4.1 million in reserves. And what I am trying to accomplish, what I'm proposing, is that you can reduce the bond and interest levies to taxpayers tonight by $500,000 a year.
So let's talk about that when we get, we will address that as part of the budget conversation. We'll absolutely address that as part of the budget conversation for sure. But in the meantime, we have the revenue neutral rate. I'm going to conclude public comment at this time and move to any action that I believe we've met the standard of reasonable. And I want to go ahead and move to item number 4. Unless board has any further discussion. Board members. No more? Okay.
Megan, can you drag up the resolution, please? All right, so in your packets, including the packets there, this is a copy of the resolution that is alignment with our ask to exceed the revenue neutral rate for the purpose of developing our budget for the course of the school year. This is the resolution here that we've had crafted in conjunction with our attorney for you. So I'll give you an opportunity to read that. Megan, do you mind scrolling up a little bit so that we can see? There, too high, right there. The motion or the resolution there, it indicates what the revenue neutral rate mill levy is. It also states that on this date here, we allowed the opportunity for the public to be heard, and it's necessary for the development of our budget that the district exceed the revenue neutral rate, and that's what this resolution speaks to, and it's in accordance with KSA 79-2988, which is also provided in your packets. Megan, would you mind sliding the presentation back up? And moving to, I will move to possibly the final slide. This is the recommended motion from the district necessary in the process to exceed the revenue neutral rate. By resolution, it does require a roll call vote by legislation. Megan just stepped out, so I'm probably want to wait for her to come back. Considering she has to record, just record any votes should the motion be made and seconded.
And speaking of the roll call vote, the way that will work, just because ain't nothing about it is fun, but a name will be drawn from the envelope. All 7 board members' names are in there. That determines who goes first, Whoever is first will respond with either aye or nay, and then it will proceed in alphabetical order from there. So it won't be drawing out of the hat every time. It's simply drawing out of the envelope to decide who gets to go first when it actually comes to the roll call vote itself. But that would only happen after the motion, if such a motion were to be made, just like always.
I think Megan is capturing names for speakers.
She's getting names.
Yeah.
What's that? I've seen her hand. I haven't heard her.
Right now, her camera is on turned off.
I'm here. I'm here.
There she is.
Bless you.
Are ready for motion? Okay. All right, I move to exceed the revenue neutral rate by resolution with a roll call vote.
I'll second.
Chris has moved and Tony has seconded to exceed the revenue neutral rate by resolution, which is written and will be read as follows. Resolution of USD 348, Baldwin City to levy a property tax rate exceeding the revenue neutral rate in accordance with KSA 79-2988. Whereas the revenue neutral rate for USD 348 Baldwin, Kansas was calculated at 44.886 mils by the county clerk of Douglas County, Kansas. Whereas the budget proposed by the governing body of the USD 348 Board of Education, hereinafter the governing body, will require the levying of a property tax rate exceeding the revenue neutral rate. Whereas the governing body conducted a hearing on September 14th, 2023, allowing all interested taxpayers desiring to be heard an opportunity to give oral testimony. And whereas the governing body, having heard testimony, finds that it is necessary to levy a property tax exceeding the revenue neutral rate. Now therefore be it resolved by the governing body of USD 348 Baldwin City, Kansas, in accordance with KSA 79-2988, the governing body hereby approves exceeding the revenue neutral rate of 44.886 mils. This resolution shall take effect and be in force immediately upon its adoption and shall remain in effect until future action is taken by the governing body. I will not read the adopted part because we have not voted, but that would be the motion in its entirety. At this time, we will proceed with the roll call vote, which Megan will draw a name from the envelope just to see who is going first. Yeah, and a vote of aye in favor or nay in opposition. Susan.
Aye.
And then you'll just read their last names in alphabetical order, and then everyone else will. Aye.
Brown,
Aye.
Harvey,
Aye.
Newfeld,
Aye.
Parks,
Aye.
Harry.
Motion carries 7-0, therefore adopted by the governing body of USD 348, Baldwin City, Kansas, this 14th day of September 2023. All right, thank you, everyone. We have no executive session, so if we could have a motion for adjournment, then we can proceed to our budget hearing. So moved.
Yeah, second.
Okay, all those in favor of adjourning, please say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
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 Okay, Motion carries 7-0. Meeting adjourned 7:48. All right. Do we need a restroom break?
Yeah.
Yep. So we are still at recess and the second meeting, and now we'll get into the budget work. Thank you. So that's separate in your blue folders. You can put away the work of your yellow folder and go to your blue folder.
I've been trying to go slower.
I'll try. I think Tim needs to be talking. What's that? Tim needs to be talking. Pretty good.
Are we ready to resume? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Megan, are you okay if I multitask by calling it back to order? Okay. Okay. All right. We were in recess for the second meeting. We are going to call back to order the budget hearing special meeting. It is 8:02. We already approved the agenda for that. And so now we're going to go into this Nate. Oh, yeah. It's just a visual block with the, like, I think he's there. Back on for the budget presentation now for 23-24.
And I'm going to hijack the first several slides here as we get into the budget here. And so for the board, I want you to notice some additional information that we'll be talking about this year. Last year, having been a new superintendent, you kind of learned some things here. So with that, I want to talk about with the budget. And one of the things we've talked about for quite a while is the importance of our mission statement. And our mission statement should be driving what we do and the decisions that we make. And when it's coming to the budget, your budget needs to reflect your mission statement. And that's preparing students to positively impact the world through academic, social, emotional, and behavioral success. And that's our why. That's what we're doing at the district. That's what we're doing in our buildings. That's what we're doing in our classrooms. With that, as we've talked about before, prior to my coming on board with the district, you started a strategic planning process that included hours of conversations, survey results, discussions that led to the identification of these 4 target areas. And our budget needs to also reflect efforts that are going into these target areas. Preparing students for success, supporting the needs of students and staff, engagement in schools and school activities, and target area 4, operational effectiveness, and maintaining and improving facilities to create safe, healthy, and inspiring learning spaces. And finally, the efforts that we put into our budget goes into what we're trying to accomplish as goals for our district. From a social emotional standpoint, we'd like to see our students scoring low risk on My Savers by 27. We'd like to see that number around 90%. Now, we're not saying that we don't want it to help us identify a student that may need some help, but we're also wanting to notice that we've got a culture and environment, a system that they feel safe, welcome, and embrace there. 80% of our students scoring a 2 on the Kansas State assessments or a 23 or higher on the ACT by 2027. It's important to understand the rubric that the State Department put together when they built their state assessment was a 2 indicated that those are the basic skills and learning necessary to be post-secondary ready. So it's important to understand that. This year as a district, we had 74 and 75% in reading and ELA, or ELA and math, excuse me, within those 2 respective areas. It's important to point that out. The last one there, we'd like to see 90% of our students by 27 graduate with either 6 college credits or a career technical education certificate. Not every student is career bound, or excuse me, college bound. Not every student knows what they want to do right out of high school. And so a CTE certification can help them in the work industry there, the work field, or if they are going to college, those CTE programs can help them as they enter into those college realms. Additionally, at the high school level, if we can help students obtain college credits before they enter into college, we're just helping them advance if that is their desired path. With that said, we've got our budget highlights. In your packet, you have a copy of several budget items there. You've got the Form 150, which is basically an explanation of how the budget gets calculated. You've got what's called a Code 99. That is a breakdown of the various main budget categories. So those are some items there that you can reference. When you're looking through the budget, a couple of things that we wanted to point out as a comparison to last year, as well as what we are proposing this year. This first slide there is the mills as well as taxes levied, and I'll allow Nate here to do a little description here or an explanation of this slide.
Yeah, so for 22, 23, the general fund taxes levied were 1.989 million, which was a total of 20 mills. Supplemental general LOB taxes levied were just over $1 million, with the BOTA adjustment to the 7.991 mills. Capital outlay for taxes levied were 873,000, a total of 7.089 mills levied, and bond and interest taxes levied was 1.785. Total mills of 14.488. Our proposed for 23, 24, with the carrying over for general fund for 20 mills as statute is 2.472 million. Our supplemental general proposed tax levied is 1.8 million with 13.073 mills, a little bit of a decrease over from last year for the approved mills. Capital outlays are proposed is 982,000. With total mills of 7.10, so a little bit of an increase over last year. And the bond and interest proposed tax levied is just over 2 million at 14.488.
All right, so a couple of things there. Let's see, wait a minute, I'm a slide ahead on my computer here. All right, we want to make sure that, Nate, you might have said this, I was digging through my notes here. At top of the comparison, we wanted to make sure as you're looking at the comparison that you see there's that reflection of what last year's LOB mills were, and then what the adjustment made in terms of BOTA to balance out the rest of the school year. Anything else there, Nate? Okay. All right, this next slide, it's the highlights. Go ahead, Nate.
Yeah, just like the R&R, we want to give a comparison for the last 3 years, and then obviously the current year that we're seeking approval or the estimated taxes, excuse me. So for general fund, again, carries the 20 mills over. Supplemental general fund, you can see that we did have that dip in 21-22, but I had the adjustment, and then our estimated 13.073 for the 23-24 year. And then capital outlay, again, we did have an increase in 21-22 to 8 mills. We did decrease that in 22-23. And then we have our 7.100 for 23-24. Bond and interest, it was obviously 14,997 in 2021. We decreased in 21-22 to 14.502. We had a 22-23 of 14.488, and we're doing the same request this year for 14.488.
A couple of things that I want to point out here. The district qualifies for what's called a cost of living adjustment, and what that has to do with the fact is there are roughly 20 districts across the state that were given this extra opportunity within the general fund due to increased assessment values within those districts. We declined the opportunity to leverage that because that would have required an increased mill within the general fund. So that would have been additional tax dollars levied against our community. We declined against using that. The second item there we wanted to identify is back in the spring, we approved the resolution, the board approved the resolution that allowed the district to develop a budget that could take the LOB to the maximum of 33% annually if they choose, if the board chooses to. This year, the development of the budget, we decided not to go to that 33%. Rather, we are trying to leverage a 31.7%, which is a 0.1% higher than the state average of 31.6. Okay. Another thing that I wanted to bring up. This is the time where I want to reference, and when I had communications with Mike Kennedy, he mentioned it in his previous comment that he provided a plan to me. He gave it to me, what was that, Mike, about a week ago, and I spent time looking at that plan. I ran it past a couple of individuals that work with school financing, and in terms of the ability to pay down the debt that he's got there, yes, it does that. It does that. And I've had the conversations with Mike on it. And I thought about it long and hard for a couple of weeks. I had a meeting with him. Mike explained some of the details to it. We went back and forth in terms of some ideas and what are some concerns that I have with it. One of the concerns that I have is the idea that if we're looking at paying down bond and interest over a 5-year period, then what that's doing is the reduction of the mills occurs. But I wanted to look at what happens to the cost of construction over time within that 5 years. And the plan that he's presented to me, it says that there's a savings of $2.227 million. When I run that against the cost of construction increases over the next 5 years, I wanted to say, okay, what's the difference between the cost savings within paying down up front, and what does that do to the cost of construction in terms of what the increase looks like? In conversations and getting that data, cost of construction over the last several years has been as low as 4%, 3.9 something. About 4 years ago, it went up to 13% in 20. It was down to about, or 21, excuse me, and it went down to 9% last year. This year, it's looking to be around 4%. Those cost of construction items, the industry is looking at what could that do in 5 years, and I was comparing it to the needs that we put together with the bond project, and that was based on the 25 million, what I knew there. If we were waiting to look at engaging in another bond process, the bond capacity that was 25 million in 2023, by 2027, we would be paying the cost of increase at 4% would be an increased cost of about 4.24 million. If that cost of construction increases at 8%, the increase goes to 11.73 million. And so trying to justify what does the short-term savings look like versus the long-term savings of engaging in a bond project in 27 or 28, to me, the answer is it's going to be asking our community to do more. It's going to be costing them more. And as it was stated earlier, the dollar just doesn't go as far. There's that line, that comment of it's never cheaper to build more than it is today. So with that, taking that into consideration and hearing some things over the weekend, it wasn't within my, I'm going to diverge a little bit. I heard a conversation this weekend with an individual that's trying to help an individual in the community. So I mean, it pulls at my heart too. But in terms of trying to accomplish the strategic planning goals that we've got, the mission statement that we've developed, our district goals, the budget that we've put together in front of you is with those mill levels is what's going to help us get there. Looking long term, keeping our mills at 4.48 right now, and unless there is the decision to part ways with our plan to enter into the bond. We've still got 2 more opportunities, and we, as a board, we are continuing those discussions. It's the best thing to do right now is to keep that mill where it is at 14.488.
What would be the minimum? I guess maybe now to discuss stuff.
We can wait to discuss it, but yeah, but we can talk about that when we get to the discussion.
So, when comparing what was initially approved in 22-23 to this year, 23-24, a total reduction of 0.212 mils is what we have as our estimated mils. Proposing a decrease of these mills overall is in an effort to decrease patron tax responsibility and still maintain funds necessary to operate the district. Absorb increased inflationary costs, increase salaries and wages that we did this fiscal year, a 5.3% increase for the staff and supplemental rating, and approve the budget. Approve the approval of the budget that establishes, the maximum limits of the 23-24 budget.
So one of the things that has taken place is through our negotiations conversations, our teachers, starting pay for our teachers has been the lowest in the area by far. And we had an opportunity this year, and there was a dedicated effort this year to provide our staff with a raise that they've been seeing other communities gather. And we're trying to make sure in terms of getting the best out of our students. We want to be able to hire the best. We want to be able to retain the best. And so those efforts do not go unnoticed, but our budget also needs to reflect that.
In this slide, you have a comparison for the 2 years that there's years that has been an increase of 1.5 million. How some of these funds have been used are listed there. We have the voter recovery, career and technical education pathway expansions, to subline that instructional materials and resources cost for new CTE pathways for 2 new pathways and at the high school and junior high. Our CTE certification was mentioned before for the cost and new legislation this year for the student certifications. Special education increased costs, deferred maintenance needs at the USD 348 facilities, increased costs for the classroom substitutes, instructional material adoptions, covering costs for expiring grants, and costs with increasing student enrollment.
So I wanted to talk about a couple of things there. So the special education increased costs, that's an important item there. The percentage of funding that comes from the state level, that's statutorily 92%, is only coming to us at 69%, which previous year was 72%. So we've got to make up those funds out of our general fund. That's where that comes from. The increased cost for classroom substitutes, we've already reaped some impact there. While there are times when we've had some testing going on within the building, so we've had a high volume of subs in the district. When we get to our normal daily sub job filling, we're getting better results there. We're already seeing that. Instructional material adoptions. As legislation came through, we were able to purchase a new ELA program for our students at the elementary level. And now we are in need of updating our secondary curriculum materials. And there's about 4 different areas that need to have material adoptions occur. Covering costs for expiring grants. This is an important one. The whole purpose of developing that 3-year staffing plan that took place, which is also included in your documents, is to help us foresee what are those positions that our building administrators, our operations team, which is our directors, our department directors, and our principals, identified as needing to be able to move forward so we can continue to address the goals, to address our strategic plan. And we've got a list of individuals that are coming off of expiring funds. And by those expiring funds, we're talking ESSER. We've got 4 positions at student success, a position that have deemed themselves irreplaceable within those buildings. They are making a huge impact. We need to figure out how to sustain those positions when those grant dollars run out in December of 24. We've also got some health aid needs. We've got a great health staff health services staff across the district, and they are also very beneficial. We want to make sure that we've got a plan to maintain those. And that's not about growth there, that's about maintaining. And then the cost with increasing student enrollment, I mentioned that earlier. We've got about 35 new students entering our buildings that aren't getting the state aid that the other students that came to us last year are. And so it costs money to educate them. It costs money to serve them. So we need to make sure that we get that built in. The career and technical education pathway expansion. I'm very proud of the high school in terms of the work that they are doing. They've got a renewed focus in terms of what we want to do for our students and what our students want. Their students have had voice and choice in that, and that's incredibly important. And it's being utilized in a way that's reflective of our community and what the partnerships that could exist there. Those programs, I don't mean to be flippant with this, but those programs are not free. It does cost, as the point that was made. It does cost, but those are incredibly valuable programs that are very necessary for our students. I've talked to a number of kids, but I asked, what are they graduated this spring? What are they doing? Several of them are going to K-State to study animal sciences. Would have been great if we could have had a CTE pathway to help support them as they venture down that path with that career technology or career and technical education support behind them. So sorry to go off on a little bit of a, again, Jerry Maguire round 2 statement on, but I wanted to point out where these funds are headed. That's a big impact.
This is just we wanted to add a graph just to show that, as I mentioned in the R&R, breakdown for the salaries for the staff. So that's a reference here.
As you can see, our licensed staff, our certified staff are getting a large share of that. And when it comes to the general fund, as Nate mentioned earlier, 83% of the general fund is allocated to staffing. Again, so that is the budget itself in terms of where we are looking to head with the mills that we are looking to apply. We believe that this budget here will take us to accomplishing our district goals, as well as guiding us down the path the vision that you've set as a board in terms of where you want us to head and where you want us to lead our students, and then tying back to our mission statement. This will help us ensure that students positively impact the world through academic, social, emotional, and behavioral skills. So, Kelly, we are back to the public testimony time.
Thank you. All right. This is, I need to write down a question I have real quick before I lose my train of thought. Okay. Education. So we want to make sure, again, to offer opportunity for us to prioritize listening in the form of public testimony. And so at this time, is the board okay with the same definitions of what is fair and reasonable for this hearing as well? If so, let's just have a motion so that it's formal. And it could be as simple, if you're okay with how we did for the first, it can be as simple as adopting the same.
That we adopt the same outlines for public speaking and testimony as we did for the R&R meeting here for this budget.
Okay.
I'll second, and I want to say, last year we allowed a back and forth that I don't think was productive, and that's not what we're voting for now. And we can't allow that. We're not here to have a long conversation. We're here to listen and then have our discussion. That's what we're voting on.
Message received, I'm not strict enough.
No, that wasn't it.
All those in favor, please say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you, Susan. Motion carries 7-0. Okay, at this time, if anyone would like to speak, again, you are welcome to do so.
Hi, Mike Kennedy again. Superintendent Dodge, thanks for at least bringing up the proposal around the bond and interest. I don't agree with you on some things, obviously, we know that. But look, I want to explain this to the board and to Phil, who had made some comments earlier. Your current power of taxation allows you to collect bond and interest taxes to pay for the projects that were approved by voters in the past. It is unethical for you to continue to over-collect taxes to put a bigger reserve in place for some future project that hasn't been approved by current or future voters. And what has been happening over the past few years, in particular last year, when you had to make a critical decision about which account to cut, is you cut LOB instead of cutting bond and interest, because you wanted that $1.8 million in levies to go into the account and make it look better so that you can sell the bond, hopefully sell the bond to this public and say it had a lesser impact. You were spiking the taxes in advance of a vote. Despite losing that vote, what you're proposing tonight is to continue to spike the taxes, because I've given you a very clear plan how you can roll back those taxes to people and pay the bonds off early by using half of what you have in your reserve account. And that would save our taxpayers $3 million over the next few years. You can't rely on our future bond being approved by the voters at some future cost for some future project that may or may not be the same as what you tried to pass in the spring. In fact, 4 of you are lame ducks in that regard. And I strongly advise you not to take the power to put a new bond onto the ballot in the spring after you're already gone. That should be the responsibility for the newly elected board. So I'm asking you, consider this proposal. It saves the taxpayer money today. It leaves future taxpayers the opportunity to vote on a bond and a project, and the taxes that the new board will have to come up with, and the size of the project that the new board will have to come up with. But if you continue to tax these taxpayers today before there's a new project, you're just soaking us. You're soaking us right now to try to stash it away from the future. And that is, I'm sorry, it may not be illegal, but it's unethical. It is completely unethical for you to collect money in advance from a new project to make that new project seem more palatable in the future. If you need any more details on this plan, I'm happy to talk about it. But that's the message I wanted to get across to you on that matter today. I don't know if you can answer questions. I think there was somehow some stuff in this presentation justifying some of the expenditure items here. It's hard to sort out with the information provided and the way accounts are moved around, but at-risk K through 12 spending has gone from $700,000 to $1 million, currently proposal over the last 2 years. I don't know if what you covered, Mr. Dodge, and Mr. Holder explains why we're seeing such a rapid increase in that area. And maybe that would be helpful to tell the public, like specifically, like, yeah, we got more problems, or there's teachers coming off of funding or something like that. I think it would just be helpful to clarify that so we can understand that. We certainly want at-risk kids to get caught up. We're all trying to push these kids to higher levels. I think we all want that. There was another part. I mean, I know that you've given across the board 6% raises to teachers as well as all of their staff this year. I wish I got a 6% raise this year. It didn't happen. Looking at the budget at a glance documents, again, they sort of parse this information differently. And I think that like the admin and support line has gone up really, really large there. Like you're showing in that particular view of the budget, prior years were somewhere around 1.7, 1.8 million dollars. And this year it's spiking to $2.4 million. And I don't know, I can't decipher from what admin and support is other than salaries. But it certainly seems like it is going up, and I really don't understand why, but I don't know if anybody else can explain that tonight too. But That's all I want to say. Again, I'm here, really here to really urge you guys to consider retooling this bond and interest. I mean, it would be a olive branch to extend to the community that you've heard all the public comment. It would put us on a path to let future voters decide what they want rather than taxing current voters for something that hasn't even been approved yet. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a quick clarification question. So you said that special education, the state is supposed to be funding it at 92% and is only funding that at 69% right now. And I know that's historically low. It has not been that low in history. And then on the budgeted expenditures for this coming year, you've got slightly over $3 million budgeted for special education. So if you can't answer now, maybe you could just clarify this later. Is that the amount that the districts have to look at because the state of Kansas is not fully funding special education?
Well, let me get to that discussion.
Yeah, you can just discuss that later for clarification. Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mark Bradley again. Yeah, I just want to hit on a couple of things, come back to the transparency issue and stuff like that. And I like what kind of Mike said. I think it'd be, bad on transparency if you guys try to put another bond, pass another bond, especially before we leave in. I think it gives the voters a chance to sit there and make that decision, let people vote and make that, I think that's probably what the election's probably going to come down to be honest with you all. So, but transparency and stuff like that, I'll talk about strategic goals. I've always believed transparency and accountability comes back to, it's never the receiver's fault, it's always the deliverer. And like I said, I really want to see you all succeed. I really want to see the board succeed because like I said, I have a vested interest in here. Like I said, we may disagree on topics, but we can agree to disagree on there. So it always starts at the top. I've heard a lot of things from admin coming back and saying, hey, they're hitting a lot of flack from parents, from teachers going in, or from parents, just the community. And it starts at the top. You guys are the screen for the administrators. You guys got to be that screen. This presentation, I'm not saying it was horrible, but most people, most farmers and stuff can't read this. They can't get it. Where does it go down to? What's the nexus of what it's going down to? The objectives, because at the end of the day, it just hurts the kids. If you got parents mad at you guys and stuff like that, and they don't want to pass bonds, they don't want to get stuff. People think I was a no vote, but people think I'm against the stadium. No, I think we need a stadium. I know that probably shocks a lot of people, but I think we got to be, good with the money, especially when I'm seeing documents that say, hey, this is where I come to strategic goals there, Mark. They're not written in a smart format. Your action items, I think your strategic goals, high level, are great, but there's nothing to hold anybody accountable to, and that's what people are wanting. For example, on preparing your students for success, in one of the deals says increase ACT tutoring or academic prep in one of the action steps. You guys have no way to hold anybody. You guys can literally hold one extra class and check, and you got it done. It would really be helpful if those are some type of SMART goals. Everybody knows SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound. So, for example, by the end of 2025, we increase ACT prep scores or prep classes or tutoring to make sure 75% of juniors and seniors get it to the overall goal of increasing ACT scores by 1%. That is something when you guys go to budget and increase the budget or decrease the budget, you can go to the public and say, hey, I've increased this budget because to get the rest of the way, we need to do that. Or we've thrown money after bat. But none of those action items, get it, your strategic goals are big picture and you don't put that on there, but your action items should have that. From a military planner, it should have that to hold people accountable. And then issue, you talk about operating effectiveness, maintaining, improving facilities and stuff like that. You guys talk about them in your state assessments. I mentioned twice about the IC and PC not having enough room, needing more space, but there's nowhere on your strategic goals. And those were created in 2022. A stadium wasn't on there. CTE stuff wasn't on there. So that's where your lack of trust is coming from in the budgeting process and stuff and trying to get this stuff across. I get it. I don't think you need to probably have everything. Plans changed. We didn't know the Panasonic plant was coming in and stuff like that. I get it. You can't always plan for the future, but some of you missed all three of those on there. That's where trust is coming from when it comes to the budgeting process and stuff, ladies and gentlemen. And again, I will go back again. The presentation was great, but why wasn't it out before? I know there's legal requirements. You can't give everything out. I get that. I understand that, Mark. But weeks before, read ahead. A general idea of what's coming down the pipe is really going to help the community go and understand the budget and support you guys on the open communication. Even a couple of slides. Here's the big picture items. Here's what's coming out. revenue rate neutral, we'll go back to that a little bit, like what are we doing? What are we doing with that money? That's how you're gonna increase this transparency and accountability that I keep hearing. And then hopefully down the line, when we come to a bond vote, you come to a vote, because like I said, I know you guys didn't do the 6 lanes on the track, but you guys inherited that problem. And you guys are the school board now. So the school board passed, whatever you want, you say they kind of put that pile in your guys' lap, and whoever inherits the seats again from the election, whatever you guys put in place, we're gonna inherit that pile as well. And I can't sit there and say, point to the last one, nope, you guys own it, or we or whoever the other candidates will own it at that time. So that's what Jess should do. Again, that's what I would like to see, talking to, how to increase accountability. I'm a senior program manager. I deal with $1 billion or $1 million budgets. Something I do all the time. How do you take two people on opposing ends and come in the middle? Communication, communication, communication. So, all right, thank you.
Anyone else like to speak? Yes, sir. I'm gonna let him go first and then you can go ahead, sir. That's okay.
I'm Bill Durham again. I'm kind of a KISS person, keep it simple, stupid person. So I look at the numbers, and that's what I look at as a taxpayer. And when I look at the sheet that you guys handed out tonight, total USD taxes levied from 2021, 22 to 20, what you're proposing for 2023, 24, it's $1.5 million increase. And that's a 27% increase in 2 years. And what I don't understand is nobody makes it clear where that money's going. I get a packet like this, and even when I looked on the school district's website, I can't understand this. I'm not an accountant. And without really somebody to sit down and explain to me what all this stuff is, there's no place that really makes it simple for a taxpayer. If I could understand where the increases are needed, where that's the money needs to be increased in, would help tremendously. And it just has to be in simple form. I don't need to do these big charts. The other thing I know is I've been in businesses and I've worked for companies who have different departments, give them their budgets. And everybody has a budget that they wish they could get. And so if you get that budget, you're going to spend that money. So what I know is you can hand in all the numbers in all these different categories and say, we think this is how much we need. And everybody knows that when those numbers are handed in, everybody knows that they're going to shoot for the moon. Not in excess, but everybody wants more money. But what I know is we're in inflation times, and now we're going with an increase in our taxes of 11% from last year. And it's just hard. It's just hard to understand as a taxpayer why these are increasing at such a dramatic rate. And so I guess that's why I feel like my house value's gone up. Last year, I think it was like, what do I have here, 8.3%. And then on top of that, you guys are increasing your revenue neutral numbers on top of that. And so to me as a taxpayer, you're collecting 8.3% more taxes just on the increased value of my house based on your mill levy from last year, but yet you want to propose another 5 mills on top of that for this year. It just, for a taxpayer, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't comprehend in my mind. And I am a numbers guy. I was good at math. Not bragging, I'm just saying that was one of the things that interested me. Just one of the things that I liked. And so for me to understand why this increase is so dramatic, it doesn't make sense to me. So, and like I say, I love this community. It's been a great place to live, and I'd hate to have to lose it. Thank you.
Ken Snyder, just to go back, I want to reiterate the fact that you guys definitely have a harder job than what the county does when it comes to trying to rein in budgets. But I'm sorry, I can't help but think that, you know, the idea that look in here and do some, you know, identify really what is our scope as a school district and what can we do for creative solutions. I mean, I just, looking here over the next 4 years, we're talking about spending $1.2 million on computer and iPad Chromebook rotations with occasional some other upgrades for switches and access points. That's a lot of money. And we have, you know, I don't know, it's things like, you know, driver training. That's gone up from 13,000 2 years ago to 38,000. I mean, maybe it's necessary, maybe it isn't, I don't know, but when I'm at home, you know, crunching my numbers, you know, there's a lot of things I'd like to increase. It'd be great. I'm sure, you know, my wife and kids would enjoy it, but it just doesn't work. You know, and to, you know, to go back to the point that Mike was making with the extra money in the bond and interest fund, I mean, because people are upset about in Topeka when, you know, we have the, you know, tax revenues for the state exceeded what their projections were. And so instead of giving that money back, you know, it's staying in Topeka, made a lot of people upset. And I think that's not too much different than what's happening here, where you have excess revenue and you have an opportunity by, you know, to cut mills and not tax us quite as much, but I don't think the action is being taken on that part. Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak?
I don't quite, Greg Bruce, I have a question, and I don't expect the answer right away. I don't know if you guys have heard of the Mike Rowe Foundation. He has to do, it's CTE. He's been around for a long time. I don't know if there's any avenues through that for education for the school to learn how to do stuff to help with the CTE stuff. And then I had a question relating to this. If the state's supposed to be funding the special education stuff, they're supposed to be at 92%, but they're only at 72%. How is that possible? Is it something the state has done wrong? Are they reneging on their agreement, or? And there's nothing you can do about that?
We have to pay for it.
That blows. Okay. And then the bond thing with respect to what he was saying about the increased construction costs in a few years. In my business, when I pay off a loan, I don't have to pay the interest anymore. So that's extra revenue in my mind that's available for use as opposed to servicing debt. So I didn't know if that number was calculated in with, hey, if we pay this off early, we're gonna have this much more because we're not servicing debt and paying the interest on it. So that's, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And the technology then would be better for the CTE part of the building of the new area.
So just extra money, yeah. That was my question, basically, I mean, everybody knows if you pay your debt off early, it costs you less money. And that's, I guess, my, thank you.
Just had a question on summary of total expenditures and functional funds, capital improvements. It's saying 165% increase.
What is capital improvement?
I have no idea.
Where are you at?
That's the red thing on it.
In the bottom left corner, it's really tiny.
Yeah, that's a very tiny page number.
Page two.
Page two.
There's not a page number on here.
It's at the very, very bottom, underneath the bottom, tiny bottom left, page two.
And then a comment.
What was, I'm just catching up, what was your first thing that you said?
On the
Capital improvement.
expenditures, capital improvement, an increase of 165%.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
they wanted to have an 8.
Yeah.
Wonder if that's. I know in 22, 23, we spent more than $500,000 on capital improvements. I'm gonna hear Nate's response on
Nate,
that.
did you hear that? That's her question.
Yeah, I'm trying to,
It's on the at a glance. Summary of total expenditures.
And then I had a comment, and I may not have written it down correctly, something about competing with other schools, having something without borders. Let's take care of the community that's here now, so they can afford to stay here. That's where your primary concern should be.
Yeah, we want them to stay here. Yeah, the fear is that they leave because we are not.
I think there's gonna be a greater fear of more people leaving because they can't afford it, whether it be renters, rent increases, or the people that have homes that are getting priced out, that are gonna have to leave. Thank you.
Yes.
Crystal Curtis, I just want to know what the 2 new CTE pathways are we're looking at. I think FA is one of them. What's the other one?
Can I answer that now? All right, law enforcement, corrections, and public safety.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Can I just make one more comment?
No, you already spoke, sorry. And you went for 5, right? Did he speak for 5? Oh, okay, if you didn't speak for 5, then go ahead.
I wrote it down, he's got a minute 20.
Okay, there you go. I just want to make sure it's fair for everybody, that's.
No, I won't
Yeah.
take that long.
Yeah.
Just for open board, hear that being kind of tossed and just some research or something considered to the board. As you guys look through there, currently people can come into the district right now, but the principals, the administrators have the option to deny them here. Even if they come in now, if open board has allowed them to come in, but they have to accept them now, basically the thing is. We're pretty much at capacity if you read your guys' plan on IC and PC. You look at the older kids, we don't have to transport those kids outside the district. A huge factor for those parents and people coming in is going to be the transportation issue. The kids that can drive are going to be in high school. By that time, you're pretty well set. I'll tell you as a personnel, but when I moved to Pomona, I finished my last 2 years in Ottawa. 1, because they had wrestling and they had baseball. And 2, that's where all my friends were. So I just take in consideration as you guys look at that and stuff like that. I don't think it's going to be as big an impact of what you guys think because of that transportation issue of people coming in. Will there be some impact? It will be 0. It won't be 0, but there will be some. It's something to consider. That's going to be somewhere else that got transported for the kids here. So.
You came awfully close to that minute 20.
Hey, I expect you to cut me off. Thanks for your time.
Looks like almost everyone has spoken. Would anyone else like to speak?
Yeah, why do we have to have cops here?
I'm sorry, what?
Why do we have to have cops here?
They were asked to be here, I guess.
Who asked for them to be here?
I did. This is a passionate conversation, and we wanted to make sure that everybody had the opportunity, and we wanted to make sure that everyone was safe.
That has nothing to do, that there's no need for cops here.
Good.
You guys did it before, but this is just ridiculous. So it's for your protection, what about our protection?
No, it's for everyone. It was for everyone, sir.
I'd much rather have them and not need them than need them and not have them.
Exactly.
They're certainly not for my protection.
Anyone else have any comments?
I have a comment, I guess. I
need to address your question. Go ahead.
Yeah, would you like to address my question now? Because I think you kind of did in a way, and I wanted to reply to that.
The question itself was, does the plan that was provided,
Right.
it does exactly what it said it does. It reduces bond and interest debt, it accelerates it 100%.
Right.
It also does it by 5 years.
Right.
And that puts the district in a position in 5 years to look at what a bond and interest, or what a bond could look like if you're looking at pursuing a bond issue at that particular time. The scope of what we were looking at this May is what I used as my comparison to it. In 5 years, we're going to have deferred maintenance needs. we're going to have those needs continue to compound between now and then if we make the decision to focus on that debt reduction versus reinvesting. And so at that point in time, to accomplish what we were attempting to accomplish in the future in 5 years, that particular project goes from 25 million up to 28, 30, or even higher. And that was my consideration, and that's what I looked at. And so I looked at the immediate results. Yes, there's that immediate savings, but in 5 years, it eclipses any savings we would have encountered.
Due to the accelerated costs of construction.
Due to accelerated costs in construction.
I don't think you can
Because
really
we've talked about us being in
substantiate
this
accelerated cost of
state of
construction
recession.
into something of a budget that you're working on 5 years prior to that. To me, your whole mind, your whole focus is just on the next time you can get a chance to put another bond out there and to get another pet project.
Well, let's include that as part of the board discussion, as part of a holistic, because that's a relevant point, and that has to be part of the consideration of the conversation we have here. Does anyone else have any other specific questions or things? Because what my hope is that as a part of our conversation here at the board table, that we are addressing, what do we think about that? Why are we thinking this? What is that for? That should be part of what we do. So with that, do you have more questions?
You completely cut me off there. I don't think that.
I didn't mean to, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that paying down interest on a bond versus what the accelerated cost of construction 5 years from now doesn't equate. Just like right now, the cost for people aren't going out and building their houses right now because of the interest rates are up. That's exactly why the Fed does that. So to say that the costs are going to accelerate, I understand you need to maybe look at that in a long range plan or budget, but to put that into your budget right now, just to keep taxes higher is not good for the people. And it doesn't even make sense either, because if you're paying down interest, if you're saving interest money, you are going to be saving costs for your construction down the road. It doesn't equate the other way around. I think you're completely wrong with that. I understand you looking at it that way and the percentage, but you're paying interest, all this interest up front, and you add another, 20 million on top of that, you're going to be paying 10 times more in interest rates and interest fees than you are in construction increasing costs.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Well, whenever we're ready to
Yeah,
start, I'd love to open up to this.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we pivot to the board discussion now, let's address that and everything else we
Anybody else
will.
that wants to talk about?
He's looking still.
So.
Yeah.
It'll be part of our discussion.
Yeah, yes.
We've been very freshly involved in this bond project, and it wasn't something that we sought out. It was something that was proposed to us from Piper Sandler, who acts as our district's financial consultants. And Mike's plan, very viable, and it was one of the options that was presented, not to the detail that he's put it together, but the concept is that we could go ahead and accelerate paying off the debt, or we're in a unique position because of this additional bond and interest and the recent retirement of other bonds, that we could potentially take on a project now, okay, that would be up to in the $20 million range with it being mill neutral, okay? So no additional mills levied to our community. Well, we went through the whole community project and study and everything, and it came back, we were just a little bit short of doing the project. And if we added a little bit, which was, what was it, almost 2 mills, 2.9 mills. Thank you. It would allow us to accomplish the entire project, okay? Well, that failed. That was not what the community wanted, and they spoke, and that failed. So now I think all three of them spoke to that have been involved, and I think we unanimously have some similar, well, not similar, I think we agree. We're going to talk further about it. But we feel it's up to the next sitting board
to make the decision on what takes place next, okay? And there's conversations and they'll have to get caught up to speed on that. But what we do right now might take that, like tonight, if I understand correctly, if we were to make a major decision on cutting the current, and we'd have to reconsult and get confirmation from our financial consultants, Piper Sandler, but it could possibly eliminate the next sitting board from having an opportunity to maybe revamp or redo the bond proposal and do something now. And if they choose not to do that, then they can take everything that's in there that is sitting there now and everything that's collected from this time around, and they can put Mike's plan or the same plan that Dustin had presented to us, and it can happen. And I think that's going to be up to that next sitting board on how that takes place. But if we handcuff everyone tonight by going ahead and taking action on that, that doesn't allow the next sitting board to have the opportunity to have another mill neutral rate potentially, maybe not making the decision we did and adding the 2 mills or 2.9 mills. Maybe that was a bad choice on our part. But regardless of what that option is, we feel like that should be their choice. And we don't want to be taking action tonight that doesn't allow that to happen. I think we could all argue if we had a crystal ball, it would be so easy to make some of these decisions, okay? And also in your own financial lives. How long am I going to live? What am I going to need for deferred maintenance costs? Those kind of things. And if we knew those kind of things right now, to Mr. Dodge's point, is it better use of our community's tax dollars to wait till 2028 and spend $6-7 million more than what it would cost to do it now by saving the money today? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know. I think the sitting board now felt like our district could use these upgrades now. And I don't think very many people, and even you in this room, would argue that we probably would benefit from having the facilities sooner than later. So that's kind of my take from my viewpoint of what I've seen and been involved in this. And I guess I really truly believe it's going to be the next sitting board that ultimately determine how that plays out. So add on or.
I would add on to yours and look at it from a retrospective view too. When we look now, here we are, look back 6 years in the past or whenever that track got put in. And if we would have just done it then, see how much better it would be now. Well, 6 years from now, we're gonna be looking back thinking, I wish we could have done it now. So I think from a retrospective aspect, the best time to ever do something was yesterday, and the second best time is today.
Well, and the concept of business, we're not a business, and it frustrates me because I would much rather run our district like a business. But, businesses reinvest in their business before they've become debt-free. Families buy new, bigger homes before they've paid off their home. They take the equity, and so there's 2 different models. My grandma and grandpa, they would be, hey, you're paying off that car before you buy another car. And there's more than one way to peel an orange. And we're to Buck's point, we can agree to disagree on some things, and there's different people with different mindsets and philosophies towards it. So.
Question, if you pay off the bond, your mill levies go down, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's actually what I was.
How hard is it to get it back up? Because you mentioned that you were the one that said give it back, right?
Yep. And then
So if we do what Mike said.
I think
the
between
bond-
Phil and I, we've given,
Yeah.
not given.
Yeah.
Let me use the better term.
Released.
Sorry, released. I don't
What
know.
asking for?
Yes, more than 6 mills. And,
There's 3 or 4 years in a row.
yes.
Yep.
And, that seemed like the right thing to do, because again, as it was noted earlier, if there was not a specified reason, the way this is like, hey, this is what we need and we need it for this reason, then in the spirit of let my yes be yes and my no mean no. And, I heard a comment earlier, I think I physically, farmers don't understand stuff. I come from farmers, and farmers are some of the smartest people I know. They understand stuff just fine. And property taxes, if you're a 3rd-generation farmer, you understand that property taxes, they're just this shy of being the devil themselves. So, you know, that is a real reality. I can't say that I regret
Let's recess.
releasing mills. But there is a part of me that I do worry, I'm just being honest, I do worry that the releasing of those mills has now put us in a situation that, you know, we're taking some medicine here. You know, these are the needs that are reflected. This is how much it costs. It does cost more this year than it did last year. And shoot, Buck wants us to buy buses. I mean, this is what it is. And I do too. Like, but we cannot afford that because this is what it has. Now, you can have good discussions about what the right kinds of priorities are. And that's why it's good for people to talk about those things. It is. People can have different ideas and we can respectfully agree to disagree. I mean that with all my heart. But in terms of identifying, and what I want to make sure is that we do not rush this discussion. I want us to try to truly hit every single question. Another question that Mike
Kelly,
said.
before you go on,
Yep.
I'm sorry to extend everybody's night, but we need a bill break.
Oh, sorry. My next thing I was going to say, okay, I'm going to call a recess, but the next thing I was going to say, I want to address questions about increased funding for at-risk and some of the other questions that got peppered along. I want to make sure we do our best to address those. All right, recess. Sorry, Andy. Man, I'm going to be on your list tonight. I'm not strict enough. I'm not letting people go to the bathroom.
You were on my list for that one too.
Sorry. Sorry. I guess I didn't hydrate enough today. I just opened it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was like, I didn't know.
This will be my one good day.
I was supposed to tell you,
Why not?
like a month or two ago.
Back to order.
Lose one every couple of years.
It is 9:06. Yeah. All right, okay. And other folks, feel free to jump in. I just want to try to address questions in a way that also facilitates open discussion at the board table. The first one, in the explanation of proposed, it was on the proposed highlight screen, over 2 years, and it says right there, increase of 1.5 million. How are these additional funds being used? Okay, I think we've talked quite a bit about career and technical education pathways expansion, and that is a big chunk. The two new pathways are ag sciences with FFA, which is new this year. And the other one, as Mr. Dodge mentioned, is the law enforcement pathway. It isn't just called law enforcement. Can you?
Law enforcement, public safety, and corrections.
Yes, I remember there was a three-legged table and I could only visualize the first part. And because of the change, as was noted earlier, but it does add up. Those certification test costs, which also is exciting because it gives our students something to show for their work and makes, we've gotten a lot of feedback. We need students to be more viable for the workforce. Message received, but then that does not cost nothing and we have to invest in that. So that is a component. Certification tests used to be on your own dime. Now those are required to be a part of the district budget. So that's a chunk there. Another question was about covering costs for expiring grants. You might have heard a word as part of the explanation. ESSER. So let's talk about what ESSER is, what it funded in terms of positions. That money is going away. You will see that reflected as part of this 1.5 million. Those are staffing positions. Would you please elaborate on that?
So ESSER was a COVID relief grant that the school districts in the state of Kansas, or even across the nation, could apply for. And it required focus groups to help the district determine how would they spend those grant dollars. And with the 7 different focus groups that were built, the recommendations came through to fund it or to fill it with staffing positions in almost its entirety. 6 staffing positions, if you think about it. So it is 4 student success teachers across the district, one at the primary center, one at the intermediate center, one at the junior high, and one at the high school. They work with students who are struggling. The scope of it is to help students that faced some struggles as a result of the pandemic and the ins and outs and the chaos that ensued. And now they've worked themselves into a position of relevancy to where they have made a huge impact. At the high school in particular, it is a tremendous impact, and it's changing how we look at students who struggle. And so it's one of those, it's a position that building is identified, we need to keep them. All the way down to the primary center. We had a presentation last year in the spring, the impact that's being made at the primary center, that, this is beyond just recovery from the scheduling chaos that occurred. This is helping our kids, and it's making a huge impact. Same stories come from the ICE, and the same things taking place over at the junior high. Those are relevant positions, they're staffing positions. So when you think about salaries, you think about benefits based on the years of experience that individual can have, that's the dollars connect there. So when you're talking about salary, whether it's 50-ish and you throw benefits in there, it's not unreasonable to think that a teacher could occupy $70,000 to $75,000 within a budget to be able to take that position. You multiply that by 4, you've got a big sum of money that needs to be allocated there. We've got nurses that were hired as part of the response to the pandemic, and they came through health grants, but part of that also needed to get offset with funding from the ESSER program. And so we've got additional nurses that are helping our district, our students across the district. It's been a great, huge asset. They have worked themselves into a position of relevancy there. So those are the primary staffing. One of them, we also have a social worker over at the junior high, and she's done a phenomenal job and embedded herself into a position there that Derek and Bench rely on her tremendously, and the kids are getting great benefits to having her in the building and the impact that she's making, not just within the specific students that need her, but also the culture across the whole building. So staffing was a huge piece to that.
Can we talk about the increase? This was mentioned, and I know it's what we're looking at here. It's the expenditure at the K-12 at risk. That line item, if you look from 21 to 23, so we're at 701,941 to 838,6 to 1 million. So as a budgeted expenditure, which we've not voted on yet, but let's talk about why the at-risk line item has increased and what that's for.
Nate, can you come over here? While he's looking that up, I'll also point out in terms of the funds that come through for at-risk, a lot of those funds there come from federal at-risk programming, at-risk dollars. And so you're looking at funds that are students that are identified when they apply for free and reduced. Those students that serve as free automatically trigger in a paying mechanism that the federal government has their own formula. And I'm going to be transparent to this. I don't know what that formula is, but we get funds for that. And as your free and reduced numbers increase, then you have the opportunity to receive additional dollars with that. I'm going to tell you right now, our free and reduced numbers, I just got an email today, spoiler alert, our free and reduced numbers went up about 50 or so students from last year to this year based on the numbers I got today. So it's those at-risk dollars are also come from the federal government. We also at times need to supplement that to make the salaries of the staff that we serve and the materials that they use to provide instruction.
So that at-risk money is like Title I funding. I mean, it's internal. Okay. And does it also have like that 50 student increase in free and reduced? Does that also impact food service as well? Because I know that changes the compensation model.
So yes, so there will be, and that will also, in order to see the real benefit there, what that will take the audit has to come through and tell us what those actual numbers are. But with the free and reduced meals that come through, as students come through and they get a qualifying meal, meaning they have all three components to it, then we get reimbursable rates from the federal government to go into food service. That food service itself is at this point in time is fully sustainable, self-sustainable. We have the additional funds that came to us for 2 years when the federal government said all students can eat for free. And so we're leveraging that. We've been able to add to our food service staff. We've improved the meals that we are putting in front of students, offering more fresh fruits and vegetables. When I'm over at the high school during that lunchtime, I'm seeing plates walk out. They're just packed with fruits and vegetables. The kids are enjoying it. They're providing higher quality meats from the cooking department, so they're utilizing those funds in that end. We have been notified by the state that we need to spend down those excess dollars. You're only allowed to keep about 3 months worth of sustainability going, and we exceed that. And so it's every district that received those free meal funds is dealing with that. I've not come across a district who said, okay, check, we've done that.
Yeah.
So.
Is the big jump that we see in the food service stuff, is that secondary just inflationary costs?
I would say inflationary costs. We've also added some staff.
Yeah. And doing those coolers and things, like I know we added a cooler.
So the cooler, I'm not getting too far over my skis here because I know you dealt with the inner workings of it, but some of the funding for the purchase of the coolers, some of it could be pulled from food service, but it was also a capital outlay because that's what falls under the capital outlay.
We had some indirect costs that we utilized last year. So typically, you can or can't. Just like food service runs into the red, the district covers food service. Yeah. And so typically you wouldn't do that because we want to keep funds in food service. Because of both, we pull some for indirect costs.
So indirect cost allows us to, they moved it up. Last year it was 14%. This year is at 16, 17%. So when a utility bill comes through, you could leverage up to 16, 17% out of food and nutrition to pay the utility bill in addition to the other line he uses. That's what an indirect cost allows.
The at-risk bill is basically billed for salaries. I mean, that's not something we see an increase in salaries. We do have funds in there for professional and technical services too, for education products.
How much?
That's for for the professional. Right now, we have about, we earmarked about 112,000. Is within the budget. And then a lot of the salaries would include your gross salary, your health insurance, your social security, unemployment. Go back through here. Because we have certified, some non-certified staff, or excuse me, but there are different sections of student support that are certified. But that's where that $1 million comes. So we do get some funds from Title I dollars. That's about, I think this year was, last year was 172,000. So we may make up the difference with the cost. The lady, I'm sorry, I didn't know who asked the question. Okay, so for the capital outlay, why it looks like such an increase is historically, and let me pull the capital outlay.
I just got a text that you're not having that.
You have to put a portable speaker box on it.
No, so out of our budget this year for capital outlay, we have so the operating for expenditures is about 2.5 million. Historically, what happens is we always carry money over from the previous year. We don't spend it all. So you would spend the whole, the 1.4 million that lists there on the 165%, that's minusing the cash that we carried over from last year, which was just over $1 million. Okay. So you have projects that you may start this year, but it may roll over into next year. Or there just may not be projects that you just have cash you roll over to help fund projects for the following year. So that's kind of why it looks skewed, because that's the same if you spend the whole amount. Okay. But historically, let me go back through here. I think last year we rolled over 963,000 rounded up. And then 21, 22, we had about 742,000. This year, we have done a lot of projects through our capital outlay plan. So we want to stay around those funds just because when we build our 5-year plan, we want to be able to help sustain as instead of spending it all this year. I mean, you could do it either way. Historically, that's what they've done. So, but again, you buy a bus, we're waiting 1.5 years on a bus. Right. So that 130,000 is going to carry over. So
it goes down as it goes down as encumbered, but it doesn't leave our funds until the bus shows up on our lot.
And those funds are tied. We have to encumber it.
Yeah.
So we don't touch it. So that when the bus shows up, we have money. So we can overshoot.
Yeah. So. Another question had to do with special education. Let's expand upon that. Currently, it's funded at 69%. The law is that the state is supposed to be required to fund at a level of 92%, correct?
Yes, there is a multiplier that gets applied as they as they take on their legal obligation for state funding, and that's actually printed off that legislation. It's 72-3422. The multipliers is by law 92.192. And what the multiplier that's been used by the state in 22-23 was 7.72, and what's being used this year is 0.69. And so just doing the math there, that number is coming down. And because it's not at 92, what that means to us is this particular fiscal year, it's around $500,000 that we are pulling out of the general fund. Is the one fund that you can move to any line. We're utilizing that out of the general fund, which that is relatively 3.5, almost 4 mils out of the general fund that's going to pay for something that, I'm going to be quite honest with you, I have a hard time with this because we've already paid into it with the state. It was already mentioned this year that we got a $3 to $4 billion surplus at the state level, and they didn't fully fund at the 0.92 for all districts in the state when they had the chance. The governor's plan was to fund it to do a 5-year approach to stair step it in. So unfortunately, it's placing it on the school district's plate, and it's being placed on the backs of the taxpayers to pay that twice.
We are legally required to make up the difference, which is what your question is. I mean, you phrased it differently in a way that I appreciated, frankly, but would not be appropriate from this chair.
There is in honor of my friend Allison Bauer, you all have heard me say this before. there's been a trend over the last few decades for the paid legislators to push their taxing authority to our volunteers at this level. And I'm not crying victim because I did this once and I chose to come back and do it again. And I knew what I was getting into. But what that looks like is raising the LOB so they can say that they lowered taxes and they can push it down to local boards to raise taxes to make up the difference. And the latest iteration is refusing to properly fund special education as the courts have dictated. And that falls upon us to make up the difference.
So the state's breaking their own law.
And I would advise, I'm not telling everybody how to spend their time. I wish you would go advocate at the state level like you're doing here tonight, because they need to hear that you don't think that's fair.
And the solution is not to rewrite the law to match the practice. It's
And
just
I'd
gonna
like
stop
to,
there.
related to that, I'd like to address a point that was made earlier that got me right here. And it was another one that got me right here. And it was the explanation of why the new laws were written about establishing the revenue neutral rate as a form of transparency. I think that's great. I think that the increased abilities to have, the processes in place, I think are very healthy ones. What would have really helped people out though, and the state of Oklahoma does this, they cap property taxes once you hit a certain age. You've done your time, essentially. That would be, because the impact on anything that we do does affect, again, everyone, and everybody's stuff is tight. We all live here, but it especially affects, and I said this earlier in the first hearing, and I wanted to come back and say it again, it especially affects those people who are already on the margins, barely hanging on, and it especially affects people who are on fixed income. I've lived here for 20 years, and 17 of those 20 years, I have been very heavily involved in both forms of outreach to senior centers in various ways. And I've also been a food pantry volunteer for 16 to 17 years. I am very clear about the weight and the responsibility of these types of decisions and the impact it will make. I also am very clear and feel very comfortable with the level of detail and research because of laws like what was created with statute. And we learned a lot last year because of that. A tenet of and I don't need to be lectured on it, but a tenet of leadership is just because it's not your fault doesn't mean it's not your responsibility. We had an opportunity to learn. I duck away from none of that. My ultimate responsibility, and this rubs and pulls at my heart as a community member, and also where all of this intersects with my faith of what we are asked to do for the least of these. And that is in direct conflict with raising people's taxes, along with my history of growing up with farming and knowing the impact that property taxes made. But sitting in this chair with this responsibility, I am a school board member, and it doesn't mean that the other things are not important, but I feel very strongly that my priority has to be to respect that I previously voted on approving the needs assessment that was given to us with much time to think, and consider. If I voted for the needs assessment, then a person of integrity, I have to vote to fund what we came up with. I'm not necessarily saying I'm ready to vote tonight. That may be nuggets for other parts of conversation. I think there's good reasons to, I want to see first of all how the rest of the board feels. We do not have to vote on adopting the budget tonight. Thought this would be an opportunity to point that out. We are welcome to. We can also wait and have it as part of our agenda on Monday to let some of the things that have been brought forward marinate, offer more time for reflection, prayer, whatever your thing is to make hard decisions. We do understand that all of this is hard decisions and they're not being made in a vacuum. And whether we ultimately agree or disagree, I can assure you that every person sitting here takes the solemn nature of our responsibility with the seriousness that it requires for the benefit of education for Baldwin students. The component of the budget that has to do with raises that was mentioned earlier, raises 5%. Our teachers deserved every bit of that 5% and then some. That's reflected here. I'm going to be quiet now. Susan, I don't know if you have anything you would like to say, any other board
Before she
members for
does that,
discussion?
I want to let you know, just, I advanced the slides to the board discussion. I got sidetracked when Kelly started that and I failed to advance it, so that is the slide for board discussion. And you
I just
get
want
on everything.
Yep,
say
okay.
one thing. I have a confession. I won't be here on the 18th. I had a business thing come up. So if that affects anybody's, I'm not trying to shirk this vote. I just want all the board members to know that I won't be here for that vote Monday.
Can you zoom in?
No.
Mike brought up the idea of, the keeping the bond stuff and saying that it was unethical for us to keep that money. I don't know how I feel about that. I know that that's a pretty standard way of doing it. When you do a bond, you approve a mill levy for that bond. At that time, that's X amount of dollars. You keep it at that mill levy. And then until that's paid off. With increasing in property taxes, you wind up getting more than what you were originally getting for that money. And I think that's how everyone around us has done it. I'm not trying to say that means it isn't ethical or that it is ethical. But to that end, trying to see things from both sides. Right now, for our bond and interest payments, not trying to pay them off early, not trying to do anything other than maintain our payments. What is the mill levy that, we're asking 14.88? What's the mill levy that would be required to just meet the
Yeah,
payments?
it'd be around that 11 quarter level.
Okay.
Yeah, based upon, when we were building the budget, we noticed that.
Right.
I brought to Mark's attention, we talked about it.
Mm-hmm.
We knew that, that was a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Because we did want to look at the best result for the community, the school district, the board. But also in turn, we were in a bond project.
Right.
Piggybacking on that, I was just gonna ask, could we have, Dustin maybe here for Monday's meeting or is that?
We can ask him. It's a tight turnaround for him, but we could ask him.
I guess I'm just curious of the impact that would be to the next board and their options.
Well, so that's something to bring up too, the idea that part of this whole contract with, what am I looking for? DLR was that we would say, hey, we'll do this 3 times. I mean, there is gotta be.
There's a time stamp that could be 30 years.
We have the ability to buy out.
There's a cost to
Yeah,
involved.
and at this point in time, when I'm developing of the budget and looking at all this, that is at a bill of about 100,000 at this point in time without going through and doing his line item billing of it.
Right. So we have the option to buy out or to go through it 2 more times.
Yes.
So
If you do it 2 times and you buy out, you're paying, up to that point.
Okay.
It's not.
That's not.
It's
So
up,
if you
services up to that point.
Less than three times instead of however much.
It's buyout, yeah.
And I can tell you, I guess I did speak with this. Would this be correct? Knowing that we have board members coming in, obviously not really knowing what the direction of the board was. He advised, well, you could lower it. Unfortunately, I don't have it was about 300,000 to 400,000, I think was what we were over, if I remember correctly. But his suggestion is carry through this year, and I won't speak for Dustin if he wishes to have it here, and then potentially looking at next year's budget, because you have a new board coming in and then have time to analyze where the revision is, and then possibly adjust from there. So I mean, there's multiple options.
Yeah, because so, and again, this is a hard thing to do because here we're stuck in the idea of like we're gonna have basically 54, a voting majority of new people out of the board, right? That we're on now, and so we're trying to set this budget and then also handing off this bond idea. So that's a hard thing because I kind of feel like the community we thought we heard everything that the community wanted. We tried to put it in there. We said, oh, we need a little bit more money. We put it in there, and then we said, okay, yeah, that's great. I, for one, was very, very shocked that it didn't pass because we had so much good feedback and how we built that all up. But the idea that it did get know, I mean, I'd be open to, and especially hearing all the stuff tonight, open to reducing that, and then just, what does that then look like? So then they have to change the bond. I mean, now it's gonna, now instead of asking for 3 mils or for 2.9 mils, they're gonna be saying, if we drop the bond and interest 2 mils, they're gonna be saying we want 5 mils. So we're also kind of, like you said, handicapping the next board, trying to do that.
If you drop it, if you put it at, if you leave it at 14.488, projection is 23 million. If you drop it to 13.488, you're at 20.25.
Going to Mike's point though, too, I think, so, I think that there is some, I mean, that's why we gave back the bond, gave back the bond, released, or quit asking for those 2 mils in 2021, was that we didn't have a project yet. Now we kind of have a project that we're starting to work on. You know, at the end of the day, that extra money that's going into that, it's not going somewhere else, right? So it's not like we're taking it in bond and interest and then we're spending it somewhere else. So really, it's going to go, it's still going to that bond and interest. And then there's a slush fund, and then the new board wants to come on and they say, hey, we're going to take all this money, we're going to pay this down. It's there to do that, you know, and it's money that would get paid anyway.
It's also an
I wish
investment
that-
mindset versus a, and, you know, both are valid approaches, but a bond will have to happen at some point. There will be some point when certain things that we are doing are not going to be sustainable. I think that time is, personally, just speaking for myself, whether people want to publicly own that or not, I think that time is coming sooner rather than later in certain areas when it, you know, comes to athletic facility usage, just because of growth in other areas. And I know things always cost more money when you're playing catch up. So I would need more time to think about, because when I listen to the logic of waiting for the next board, by that same logic, I make no change here.
Right.
However, I also understand the very real request for those people who have come tonight to say, now we've already, mill-wise, we are down a little bit, but I understand that equates different with the raise in valuation. So that would be something I personally would need to think more about, because that is not an investment strategy. That is again, doing just enough to get by and take a little heat off us right now in the short term and kick the can down the road. That's kind of what, I'm just gonna call it like it is. It's kind of what has been happening in that area, because it is so hard in a community our size. And then people say, well, you should have done that a long time ago. So do we repeat that cycle by making, I don't know. I'm just, I would need time to think about that.
I mean, to Andy's point too, I think the fact that we're the ones at you know, responsible for offsetting increases in valuations and property taxes. You know, I mean, yeah, versus the county or the state or whoever. You know, I mean, you know, we're the ones that are responsible. You know, we're the ones that are look to do that.
We are being asked to offset the property tax burden.
Yeah, like Ken's point earlier, saying, the county has much more stuff than we do, this impacts kids.
You know, I just, you know, I look at this budget and I think, man, I want to cut this as much as possible. But I don't, you know, outside of, you know, that bond and interest stuff, I don't really see much that you really could do. And so if you really want to pair anything, I think it winds up having to come from there. But then that has its own whole box of trouble.
So, yeah.
I wish this could be timed or delayed so that the new board could make this decision right now, because that's.
But we can't.
But you can't. By statute, this has to be sent to the state by the 20th.
I feel exactly like what you're describing, with also just not wanting to handcuff them either direction, and I'm not sure which is better, and I don't know.
I appreciate that, and I share that concern. On the other hand, I was elected to do the right thing for things that were put in front of me for 4 years, not for 3 years and 10 months, 9 months. And I don't want to step aside and say, nope, it's off my hands because I won't be here much longer.
Well, our intent, as it says on the screen, is to not seek approval tonight, but rather to seek approval at the 18th board meeting as part of the regular board meeting agenda.
Can I ask a couple questions?
Yes, go right ahead.
Bond issue. I mean, the bond interest. It's more about payment schedule, because I know it's kind of squirrely where there's big lump payments that go out.
Yeah, Nate, you need to come back over here and use your outside voice.
Don't try to escape.
Nice try, nice try.
It's because the money costs money.
So, okay, so this might be a multi-layered question for everybody involved, but I know that like, they're just looking at 4 different bond types that we're currently carrying. I'm looking at the bond interest page from earlier, right? I know that there's also big chunks in which those go out, like it might be $1 million goes out on October 1st or whatever day, right? So, and we're carrying over money year to year to help to cushion some of that, so that if we hit that, because, we reset our fiscal year July 1st, so we have to kind of carry some money over, make sure we don't.
You've got to be able to make that payment, because that payment comes before we first get our first big check in October.
Right, so if I'm reading the documentation correctly here, we did carry over, like on July 1st, we had $2 million in that account. I also know there are payments immediately going out for that.
Went out September 1.
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
Due September.
Okay.
You have 4.1 on July 1.
So, say it again.
You have 4.1 million on July 1
Okay, sorry,
at the end of the fiscal year.
So
2.4 million goes out in September, but then you're gonna get revenue back.
Right,
You make
and
a
it trickles
small
back up
payment in
from
March.
that point.
And by the time you're done in March, you're gonna have, you do nothing with each of the bills at 4.5 or 4.8.
Go
You're
ahead.
gonna have, by the end of next fiscal year, you're probably gonna have 4.5 million on reserves.
Okay, Nate,
Yeah.
go ahead, talk.
Yeah, Nate.
When do the payments happen?
Yeah, just as Mike said, yeah. So, I mean, if we're basically, we have a payment, we're a payment ahead. I mean, we got funds sitting in there. And, in the previous direction, that's just how they structure. So yes, I mean, there's so many options you can do. We can look at.
Well, and to this point, we've checked with 4 different attorneys. We've checked with KSDE, we've checked with Greenbush. This strategy is not an uncommon strategy. And it's, as Mike pointed out, it's not against the law to do it. The idea behind it is my job in my role is to put together a budget that reflects our strategic plan, that reflects our vision, reflects our mission statement and our goals. And it also reflects the conversation direction that we've been heading. For me to come in here and unilaterally pull that away from you would not just have an impact on you and your ability to have this continued discussion, because as we've indicated with DLR, we still have, by contract, another couple options if the board chooses to do so. Or the next board that comes in, because they are inheriting, they are taking on and taking ownership of whatever takes place this year, up through December.
So to that point, to Phil's point earlier too, I mean, if we have any flex at all in this budget, I think it does come from bond interest.
Yes.
Right, so.
And we would work that.
Yeah, so whether that's a reduction in our mills that we're drawing down or an advance payment, like, is there a prepayment penalty on these bonds?
We actually looked at that last year. If you recall, we budgeted $1 million extra in bond interest, because we
Wanted to call a bond.
We did.
Right.
We have the potential, I think 32% that the state would carry to help pay off that bond.
Yeah, there's some offsetting.
Yeah, my first year, we were like, yeah, that's great, we're gonna do that. Well, then obviously the bond conversation came up, so we didn't do that. So we are looking at all directions. So.
Yeah, that's all I'm encouraging here, to say, like, if we're gonna monkey with the budget as proposed so far, I think it does need to come from that bond interest.
And so one of the conversations that we had with an attorney, he had mentioned that very point. Some boards become aggressive with their bond and interest so that they can pay down early. Yeah. I mean, they will raise new. You talk to Kevin, so I'll make sure that I say this right. That the mill levy for the bond and interest for some districts gets elevated so they can pay down and call bonds early. I mean, that is a strategy that some districts choose to operate.
Even as far as an example that, the board approved a mill to have so much excess for the purpose of paying down on principal and interest, because they.
Just advance payments.
They just advance payments, right, exactly, because as long as you have an obligation, you can, as long as you meet your obligation amount due on your bonds, right? There's no limitation on that. But there again, it comes back to the direction and the vision, what projects, if any, you know. I would say if we had new facilities and we were, you know, we were good, absolutely, let's pay it down.
Bond and interest funds can only be paid towards those bond and interest items.
So like I said, that's why I keep coming back to, there's so many options you can do, for sure. So, yeah.
What's that?
Just see if there's other thoughts on the bond interest.
All right. So just wanted to cover a couple items. So again, our intent was to seek approval on Monday night, give you some, let this marinate and go with you. On Monday night, we will ask the board to approve a budget. And if that includes the reduction there, to your point, Phil and Chris, that we can do that within that meeting. In any case, we still have to do what's called the local option resolution, because we are exceeding the state average by 0.1%. So it's 31.7% is what our local option budget percentage is. So there will be that resolution there. That's regardless of what we do, because that's tied to LOB, local option budget, or supplemental general, however you're reading it. So that resolution does not require a roll call vote, but we'll have that resolution for the board and for those in attendance at night as well.
Any other discussion or questions?
I did have, Luke had asked earlier about local contractors, saying we had never talked to local contractors, and I want to say that we've actually made a point of trying to get bids from local contractors and haven't really gotten much in the way of response.
When we send out bids, our maintenance director, our facilities director sends them out to, yeah, he sends it. Well, I'll tell you what, if you'll meet up with me when we're done, I'll get your information. I'll make sure our facilities director has it. Because we send those projects out to our local companies, and then it also goes out through the state bid process that he has to follow.
I think there could be some savings if we would reach out to local contractors. It would be certain that they would fund any fundraising, you know, because they'll give back to the community. But if you're not going to ask contractors to do something, to bid a job, you know, they'll screw with it.
Right, and we have used local contractors. I know Mike has used local contractors for a variety of things. So, but I wouldn't disagree with anything you said.
And to that point, I've learned that we don't always get complete choice or control of that. So there's some processes that we're limited by the state of how we accept bids and under deadline, you know, we've been challenged by that, but I can assure you that I'm pretty sure we're in unison here. Our desire and goal would be to always allow local contractors to do all the work, always.
And so much so, it was actually, that was one of the things that was adopted in the strategic plan under the facilities section, was to improve in that area. You also have to remember year 2, Nate, year 2.4-ish months, right?
That's year 3.
That's not an excuse, Mike. So a lot of these guys are still getting to know people in the community too. So if you know somebody, come introduce yourself. Everybody here wants a good working relationship, and sometimes people are just ships passing the night without even realizing it. So appreciate the input on that. Anybody else?
Are you required to hire contractors that take their own wage, or is it, is there a union requirement, or?
No, I'm not aware of that.
I'm not either.
Federal funding involved in it has to be.
If it's federal funding, it has to be prevailing wage.
Okay, but on the interest will be paid for by taxpayers, right?
It doesn't have to be performed on future bonds.
It doesn't have to be performed by union, that's correct, it does not, it does not.
Are
So how do you get on the list?
And you got on the list, as I mentioned him, if he's got a service he wants us to pass on to our maintenance director, facilities director, just if we don't already interact with them, just let us know, come visit us. Give me a call, shoot me an email, stop in, give us your business card, whatever. I'd love to visit and see what we can do. One of the things that we've got within our strategic plan is engage with our community and engage with our business partners. And if you've got a service that can benefit our school district in terms of job performance, I'd love to be able to visit with you.
But to be clear, there's not a physical list of contractors that we keep to use. It's usually the general contractor that has the list. We do a lot of work for schools, and it is prevailing wage every single time. Thank you.
So the school required to take your wage?
I think it's the state. Like, it has nothing to do with the school, absolutely nothing to do with the school, nothing.
Well, okay.
It's the general contractor that comes down. The school has nothing to do with it.
Okay, so as far as the discussion here, do we have any more board discussion about anything related to questions, points of clarification, direction for what we want to have prepared for Monday night?
I'd like to see an option where we strip the bond interest.
1 mil, 2 mils, 2 1/4?
Maybe even some options.
Options.
With that.
Did you hear that, Nate?
Well, and I guess if we're throwing out questions, I mean, I had a couple written down, I was just gonna follow up afterwards on it. I guess I'd like to get from, like we're saying, what are the impact, if we did go to Mike's proposed 11 1/4, what that does to.
I've got that down.
Okay. And then, also, I think Nate answered this already, but just to confirm, what would be the minimum that would meet the obligation to the bonds to carry the maturity?
Yeah, he said 11 1/4.
11 1/4 is the minimum.
That's what I heard him say.
Okay.
I mean, that's 11 1/4, so that's not great for me, but that's a 3.5 mil.
Some things to think about, and this is just maybe for Monday night, but I'll let you think about it now. One of the things that's being discussed in terms of state legislation that I've heard, and as a taxpayer, I don't necessarily know that I disagree with the idea, but as I'm looking at the budgeting, there is talk of putting a cap on assessments by counties at 4%. So by counties, that was something that I've seen come through some of my, lack of a better term, my Twitter following, my Twitter feed there. So one of the concerns, yeah, my ex following. One of the concerns that I have is knowing that would have on future budgets. I don't want to get too aggressive and wind up having to pull from the general fund to make up bond and interest payments. That is, no crystal ball. I know we can't budget for the hypotheticals, but that is something that plays through my mind.
That's an important point.
Yeah, but
you wind up keeping a little bit extra. I mean, you have what's in there extra, and you don't spend
Right.
that, maybe you have that. And then you're still.
A little bit of a guardrail.
well, then you could adjust accordingly every year.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, we've tried to avoid going up, but if we're gonna go down again this year, and there's a need in the future, they're just gonna have to do it.
Right, that's what that's,
We've been trying not to
right.
go up.
Right.
And we haven't, but.
Okay, lots to think about.
I have a question. Was it the same board member who said he was gonna work for 4 years who said he can't be here Monday?
It was.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I apologize. I really tried to avoid the conflict.
I wasn't going to call you.
I wouldn't
All right.
Motion to adjourn?
Yeah.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor of adjourning, say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
Aye. It's like, I'm all over that. Meeting adjourned, 9:51. Thanks, everybody, for your time tonight.